Good evening, and welcome to the Boise School District Board of Trustees meeting for June 9th, 2025. I'd like to welcome everybody here today and online. I'd like to remind everybody that we always conduct our meetings according to our core values of respect, dignity, honesty, responsibility, and teamwork. We do have a lot of great stuff tonight, so we will be busy. But let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that is when we miss the kids doing that. So consent agenda. Anybody, any item a trustee would like to pull or talk about on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. Trustee Gregory.
President Wagers, I move approval of the consent agenda items outlined on the agenda, enclosures 1 through 18.
Is there a second? Second by Trustee Binion. So it's been moved and seconded to approve all the consent agenda items in enclosures 1 through 18. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we'll go right to reports and recommendations. And I think we have Idaho School Board Association here to present to us. Just like that, we are lucky enough to have Quinn Perry here. So, and if you'd introduce yourself and your role, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, trustees and Superintendent Roberts. My name is Quinn Perry, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Idaho School Boards Association. And I was asked here to come tonight to kind of give a little bit of a legislative recap, even though I know the session ended what feels like ages ago. And I did this version of I've given a presentation on the legislative session probably 50 times at this point, and about to do several more. And I did this one for the Education Law Conference, and it's just a different way of looking at how policy was passed this legislative session, and I call it the session by numbers. So, Will, if actually you'll go to the number 3 slide, I'll start there. So, what I did with this is try to just cover the session in different ways so that you all can have a more interesting perspective of what did and did not pass this legislative session. So number 3, the number 3 was the number of bills that attempted to integrate religion into our public schools, including required Bible readings, the posting of 10 commandments, and employing school chaplains in our public schools. None of the 3 bills advanced. The only one that did advance was the one with school chaplains, which that one was an awkward and interesting hearing. That legislation is model legislation. Most of the bills that we're talking about today happen to be model legislation, meaning bills that we see pop up across the country, but none of those 3 passed. But the chaplains one, it did make its way out of House Education. We testified against the bill, acknowledging that it puts school districts in particular in awkward situations where you're having to pick and choose the religious leader that chaplain serves from. And the only other person who testified on the bill was the Satanic Temple, who testified in favor of the bill. So we'll move on to the next slide. So 6 was the number of years that a school district could run their supplemental levy had Senate Bill 1094 passed. So the trustees, and for those of you who may not know, ISBA has an active resolution that was brought actually by the Coeur d'Alene School District to expand the term limits for what supplemental levies can be run for. Right now, the cap is 2 years, and we attempted to run it up to 6 years. And that legislation passed unanimously in the Senate, not a single no vote, but did not get a hearing in the House. So 2A is the second attempt for Representative Ted Hill to run his guns in schools legislation. We've seen this legislation. I think I've seen one every year that has come since I've worked at the School Boards Association. This one actually was a much more consensus piece of legislation, and it still required the school board's permission and authorization to carry firearms, which is likely why it did not receive a hearing or move forward this legislative session. So we are anticipating legislation coming up again that would sort of force school districts to allow for teachers or other folks on campus to carry firearms on our school property. But for this year, it did not move forward. 7 is at least the number of years that is attempting to find balance on a per student funding formula. So if you're not familiar with Idaho's very antiquated school funding formula that we've had since 1994, there was 2 bills this legislative session that attempted to move Idaho to what we call a per student funding formula. It is very convoluted and nuanced to move school districts to a new funding formula, because the way that our school funding formula is built is that we represent economies of scale. So in the Boise School District, where you have over 20,000 students, you still have a very different way of funding a school district in Three Creek Elementary, which only has, I think, 4 students. They still have to find a balance in ensuring they have adequate staffing and budget to make sure those kiddos are receiving an adequate and uniform and thorough public education system. So this year, there was an attempt to do that from Superintendent Critchfield, and a counter proposal from Representative Wendy Horman, who chairs the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee for the House. But this year, for the first time ever, we actually saw a vote on a per student funding formula in the Senate. It did pass out of the Senate, but neither received a hearing on the other side of the chamber. So once again, we are on our resource allocation model, is what it's called, funded based on average daily attendance, which I'm sure you speak about a lot in this boardroom. So 416. 416 is actually a bill number, so I'm using random numbers if you haven't caught on yet. But House Bill 416 was a very small piece of legislation that would have created a section of code called binding allocations. And what that meant was, if the legislature felt that the school district had misused its fund sources inappropriately, that it could claw those fund sources back, which on the face does not sound like a negative thing. When our state legislature creates a funding source and uses it for a special purpose, your school districts and your leadership here are advising you on the best possible way to do that. But it's very vague, it's very broad, and it's intended to do that. And we advocate for that because we feel it is up to the local school board, with input from your administration and your staff and your community, how those funds are best spent. So this would have inadvertently created a situation where you're likely getting forensic audits every year, which is very costly and candidly not doable in the state of Idaho, given our ratio of professionals that do those types of audits. And that legislation did not move forward. So it really, I use this as a message of, we have to educate our lawmakers about how school budgeting works, how you set your budgets, how you determine to spend those resources to help support your students. 0.86% is the amount of money that the High Need Student Fund, which was House Bill 291, would have cost compared to the revenue cuts that we saw in House Bill 40 and House Bill 304. So let me back up. House Bill 40 and House Bill 304 were 2 of the tax proposals that we saw this year that would have, of course, created, one was a property tax relief bill, and one was an income tax reduction. So for the 3rd year in a row, I believe we have cut income tax cuts. But House Bill 291 was a bill that education advocates were championing heavily, because it created a fund for school districts to apply to if they had a student that come to their district that was exceeding the cost that the school district was able to serve. So we hear stories all the time, especially in our small rural areas, about kiddos showing up that need a speech language pathologist or an interpreter or a nurse to do a G-tube. All of these cost a lot of money to the school district. And of course, that special education gap in Idaho is only growing based on what you're provided by the state and federal government. So this fund would have cost only $3 million, would have allowed school districts to apply for a fund if they had a kiddo come into their district that exceeded their need. It failed. It passed the House by 1 vote, and it failed in the Senate by 1 vote. And I like to use it as a cost comparison, is it was 0.86% of the revenue that we lost under those 2 proposals, House Bill 304 and House Bill 40. So a couple of other facts, 890 is the number of bills that were introduced the first 10 weeks of the legislative session. That is a record number. It has only increased. I think the last 3 years we have broken record by record, but it was an enormous year, this legislative session, for what we saw for a number of public policies. Many of them were model legislation, as I mentioned, but of course, many were brought by lawmakers in their own right. So it was a big year for legislative session, and 97 specifically covered education. So if you ever wonder what it's like to be me during the session, it's busy because we know that public education touches everything in our legislative landscape. So we are on all of the time ensuring that we are making sure that our members are made aware of the policies impacting public schools, and of course, ensuring that your voices are heard. And out of those 890 or so, 340 bills became law this year. I try to remember and provide context to folks at the Capitol that whatever happens in that big white building in downtown Boise, it takes a lot of work back at the school district level to implement all those policies. And you're lucky that you have a wonderful administrative team here in Boise that's likely helping your district get on that. But we are at ISBA in implementation mode, getting ready to release the policies that are impacted by the legislative session this year. So diving right into other policies, $50 million. That's the amount of money now diverted to provide tuition reimbursement through House Bill 93. So trustees, when I was here in January, we talked at length about this legislation. We are already watching and seeing how this diversion has unfolded. And I just want to pause and say that I was unable to come to your May meeting because on a whim, I actually flew out to DC on like a 24 hours notice to go talk on the Hill of DC, Capitol Hill, about the federal school voucher proposal that is buried in the budget reconciliation that is now before the Senate for final consideration. And if paired with House Bill 93, that would provide families anywhere to $10,000 or more dollars from their state and federal match to be provided as reimbursement, which is likely exceeding what most people pay in taxes, mind you, to be able to receive that reimbursement to go to private school. The other part in the budget reconciliation that we're trying to get folks to be aware of is that in addition to that, it also creates a shelter for people to give their donations to these scholarship granting organizations. And it's a dollar for dollar match, which is unlike any other charitable giving. You know, when you give to the food bank or things like that, it's not a dollar for dollar match, but the private school tuition proposal in the budget reconciliation in Congress does provide that. So we are trying to make folks aware of that. And $338,679,834, a very specific number, but that is the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy's projected analysis of House Bill 93, which is Idaho's school voucher proposal by the year 2027. So if you don't know who the Center for Fiscal Policy is, they are an excellent nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring that lawmakers and members of the public are able to project and see the impact of their budget policies. So we have deep concern about where that could be. Folks often tell us, and throughout the legislative session, that $50 million, they would have to raise that cap. We believe, and there are already proposals floating out there that would already immediately lift that cap next year, but at least by 2027, we would likely see it rise to $338 million. $400,000 is the amount of money spent to target 3 anti-school voucher candidates in 2024. So again, I did not modify my presentation from the law conference. This is all publicly available information on the Secretary of State's website. But just to give you context about where we are in today, we're seeing amounts of outside money coming in to influence our public policy, particularly on public education tactics that are targeting folks who are pro-education and, of course, against for candidates who are pro-school voucher. 108 was the amount of everyday citizens that asked to be a part of our anti-voucher coalition. So we invited members of the public to participate in those. That meant that they received emails, they were writing op-eds, they were receiving up-to-date information on the regular that were not a school leader. So to give that context, I know that may not seem like a lot, but we already are emailing hundreds of school board members, trustees, and superintendents every day. So to have an additional 108 folks reach out and want that information, we feel like is really compelling. And of course, 32,366 was the number of calls that Governor Little reached in that 5-day period before he had to sign or veto House Bill 93, urging him to veto House Bill 93. That's out of 37,000 total calls, which is about 86% in opposition to that bill. 7 is the number of FTE that the Tax Commission has requested to administer House Bill 93. So it's really important to note that the original fiscal note didn't even calculate for any new FTE. And by the time we adjourned sine die, they had requested and added 7 new FTE to the Tax Commission just to administer the voucher tax credit. That's $50 million. So the good news out of this was that they took that money out of the $50 million and didn't increase that appropriation to the Tax Commission. And 4 was the number of bills that governed flags on government property, including one governing flags on school property that will apply to the Boise School District come July 1. So we've seen this come time and again across the country. You see it now applying to other political subdivisions like cities and counties, but there is one, House Bill 41, that will apply to school districts come July 1st. 5 is the number of cell phone bills that we saw in schools. So kudos to the Boise School District for you all being very advanced on this, but this was a very popular topic. Everyone's read The Anxious Generation, and it is certainly spreading through our communities, but only one became law, and that was Senate Bill 1032, which really was a negotiated effort from Representative Petsky and Senator Treg-Burnt from the Meridian area. And that just really compelled school districts to have policies to ensure that our kiddos are having a distraction-free learning environment. So luckily, you're 10 steps ahead of the game on that one. 3 was the specific number of minutes that is included in a high-definition video that shows the fetal development of the brain, heart, sex organs, and other vital organs, as well as the process of fertilization and each stage of human development in utero. So this was a bill that was passed. It's Senate Bill 1046, if I'm remembering correctly. And this specifically designed piece of policy is a video that your teachers will be required to show in ages 5th through 12th grade anytime they're talking about the human body, sex education, biology, or other areas. So originally, we had attempted to work with the sponsors to kind of decide, like in 10th grade, everyone will watch this video versus this innocuous 5th through 12th grade, you'll watch it here, but not there. Unfortunately, we were unable to come to consensus. So we are going to put out guidance for school districts to navigate this. And we do believe that this requires and meets the opt-in law, meaning you'll have to receive parent permission in order to see this video in that classroom. And by the way, I'm also happy to take questions. I know this is a lot, but we can go back. So sorry that I've just dove right in. Senate Bill 1007. This was a bill that mandates public comment, but it now removes the requirement that it be related to agenda items. So I know that I spoke at length with several of your trustees about this legislation. Every school board in Idaho was already offering public comment, but in good governance, we advised always that you had that public comment be related to items on the agenda, because then the board is laser focused on the business before them. It's one of those nuances, and I realize I'm saying this at a school board meeting, where school board meetings are meetings held in public and not necessarily public meetings. They are where the community gets to see the board conduct its business in the public, but it is not here for the public to dominate the meeting. However, this bill did pass. It still allows the board to have reasonable rules, procedure, and decorum. However, the requirement that it be limited to agenda items was stricken from the law. And in some good news, we were able to secure $5 million. This is one of the only new dollars that went into the public schools budget this year. That will go to the department for the purposes of having a smart literacy training. So this training has been transformational in other states in the South that have been suffering in literacy. And so this will provide that for a very specific evidence-based training for teachers K through 3 that the department will spend on your behalf. And I just saw the department opened up those, so I'm hoping that teachers in the Boise School District are able to take advantage. 20 is the number of years a district is required to pay back to the state if it applies and receives the revolving loan fund that passed in House Bill 338. So early in the session, the governor stated to the state, he had mentioned, and you've heard about this routinely, trustees, but for those of you in the audience that may not know, even despite a historic law that provided $1 billion in a 10-year period to school facilities. Because it went out on average daily attendance, our rural districts in particular are still struggling to meet the needs of their students and their facility needs. So there was an attempt to try to make this a grant program that would be funded ongoing so that districts with a high need that doesn't have the tax base to even build a new school facility could apply for that. However, what ultimately ended up happening is they repurposed existing funds and turned it into a revolving loan. So it's just another loan that a district can apply to. It's capped at $5 million, and they're required to pay it back using their property tax relief money through House Bill 292. 400 is the fall student enrollment of districts who can now have increased flexibility for the hiring of trustee spouses. So I'm going to glance over that because that does not apply to you all. But for small school districts, they'll have increased flexibility when a teacher may be married to a school board member. 9.5% is the percentage of flexibility restored to staff allowance for school districts in House Bill 305. So this is sponsored actually by not only an employee of the Boise School District, but a state lawmaker that represents the Boise School District. Representative Sonia Galaviz brought this legislation to bring back the flexibility that school districts had lost in the downturn of the economy when their class sizes exceeded the statewide average. So a school district was being punished if it had a 4th grade class that might have exceeded the statewide average. They were losing flexibility in how they could use their budget line item for that. So we're excited that we saw some increased flexibility there and removing of red tape that was not serving our schools. And 6 is the House Joint Resolution, which is a proposed constitutional amendment on the English language that would have pretty far sweeping consequences on public education because it would require all instruction, all public documents to be made only in the English language, which candidly most districts are doing. However, we've been getting a lot of questions from Spanish teachers, particularly in those upper grade Spanish teachers where you're predominantly only speaking Spanish, and if that would have an impact there. I realize that is likely not the intent of the sponsor, but constitutional amendments have a far-reaching consequence because it's the Constitution. So this will go on the November 2026 general election, and if passed by the voters in a simple majority, would go into effect and would become a part of the Idaho Constitution. 14 is the number of vague terms used to define human sexuality in state statute for House Bill 239. So I think this is an important one to mention. I have been really having a time trying to navigate this for how school boards will implement this policy into their districts. But this basically takes a definition and defines it with a whole bunch of other very innocuous terms. And some of it is things like pornography and sexual deviancy, things that I am confident that no public school in Idaho is teaching. However, it also includes things like sexual attraction, which could be interpreted to be like a romantic relationship. So what this does is it pivots that all instruction on these topics that meets this definition, not just in sex education, but beyond. Any instruction in the public school would have to have an opt-in and express permission from a parent before receiving instruction on that, and would be required, your teachers would be required to provide an assignment to those parents before they're able to opt their child into that instruction. So we're having to navigate how broadly we should interpret this, even though it did not change the opt-out part of what we traditionally know as sex education. We believe many school districts will likely head that way, which may mean that there's an access issue for kiddos who are not getting that instruction at home. So we'll see how this one plays out, but this one I think will be, I've been telling folks this will be likely the hardest one to implement at your district. 2028 is the graduating class that the new graduation requirements will apply to. So for the first time, we're actually having an increased credit for the class of 2028. It's going up to 47 credits are now required by the state. School districts are allowed to exceed that if you wish to. They maintained the communications credit that was on the docket to be cut in lieu of a digital literacy requirement. However, the legislature heard from many speech and debate teachers that they didn't want to remove that requirement. So now you have both the maintained communications credit and now a new credit, which will again only apply or start applying to the class of 2028 for digital literacy. It also changed a little bit of the senior project, pivoting to more of a an experiential learning project. So there'll be a required service learning, which I think is a really positive thing in the graduation requirements. But that will again apply to the class of 2028, though the department is really encouraging folks to start pivoting the senior project a little bit earlier than that. 25 is the number of years of cumulative experience for your teachers to be able to apply for a lifetime teaching experience. So instead of certifying every 5 years, if you have a cumulative experience of 25 years, you can apply for a lifetime certificate. There's more on that coming, I'm sure, but I don't know much more of that. Negative 30 million. Unfortunately, one of the saddest parts of the session was that the legislature repealed a very popular program known as Empowering Parents. That program was a pandemic era program that provided eligible expenses to all families, regardless if you went to public or private school, so long as you met the income threshold. So it really was designed for low-income families to be able to have additional educational expenses for tutoring or to have for additional experiential learning that they may not have in their community or offered through their school district. But in the waning days of the session, they sunset that program. So that money is unlikely to go back to the public schools budget, which is unfortunate, as 86% of the families who applied and received that were public school families. And they were very open about it during the session, but we likely will see this money grow the expansion of House Bill 93. 236 million is the amount of money that is now dedicated to property tax relief via House Bill 292, including 50 million of new money this year. And for this one, I just like to make sure that folks know that when the governor did his State of the State address in January, he committed $50 million towards school voucher programs and $50 million of new investment that went into our public schools, in addition to the CEC increase, the change in employee compensation increase, and a couple of other things. However, unfortunately, the only new money that went, that $50 million that was intended to go to public schools, was shifted instead to property tax relief, what we call House Bill 292, which is a great thing. I think all of us can recognize the need to ensure that there is relief for our property taxpayers who are carrying a large burden of the tax burden, so that you're able to serve your students. However, it's really important for the public to know that that money does not go to support operations of your public schools or to supporting students. It instead just replaces the revenue that the voters approved for tax relief. And $100,000 is the new threshold increased for procurement, among others, in Senate Bill 1118. So we will be updating. They have adjusted for inflation, sort of those thresholds that trigger procurement or other public works bids. So we're excited that despite only doubling it, is still more aligned with inflation and what we're seeing, so that folks don't have to go through that red tape in order to just get a project completed. 0 is the amount of schools or local governments that require masks post-COVID, but are now precluded from ever doing so through House Bill 32. So again, I have been doing this work this was my 8th session for public schools. Since COVID, we've seen an prevention for a facial covering bill every year since COVID, and this was the first year that a bill passed, which precludes a school district and any other government entity from ever requiring a facial covering as a condition of attendance. And 6359 is the amount of money added again to the career ladder cells via intent language. So this is all very nuanced if you're not in the legislature or hearing me talk about this routinely, but the legislature gave significant raises to teachers after House Bill 1 passed in 2022, but they have been doing it via intent language, which intent language expires at the end of every year and does not provide that stable consistency that your school finance officers would love to see from our state legislature. We attempted to add that to a bill this year so that there was at least a statutory insurance that that money would continue to flow to our school districts and to our teachers, and that bill failed and was in a drawer in House Appropriations. And 101 million is the amount of money, new money, going into public school budgets this year. So almost 92% of this is captured in what we call CEC, or change in employee compensation. So just for the folks in the room, all state employees got a 5% or typically a 5% CEC. And I don't want to get into the nuances of the JFAC motion, but that was what was recommended by the governor, is that we see a certain increase to all state employees. And this was the first year that our public school teachers were on CEC increases and not on statutory increases through the career ladder. So it was a pretty big shift for us all this year. So the amount of new money that came in largely was for our teacher salaries and the increase to our classified and administrative salaries, which again, is for context, is important to know that most school districts exceed the minimal amount of staff that they provide in order to meet the needs of their students. So school districts are forced to spread that money even further than what you're provided by the state. And 400 million, and I put it in air quotes, is the amount of money that's being claimed by some legislative leaders for how much money they actually put into public schools this year. So I've been trying to go on a public awareness campaign that is not evidently true. The only new money that schools saw was the 101 million that I previously alluded to, in addition to property tax relief, which again does not go to public school operations, and of course the $5 million that goes into literacy. And then $0 was the amount of money transferred into PSIF. So if you don't know what PSIF is, then you're lucky because you did not live through the downturn of the economy. But PSIF is the Public Education Stabilization Fund, which is also known as a rainy day fund for the legislature should there need to be significant cuts due to an economic downturn or recession. And they transferred $0 into PSIF this year, which is pretty unheard of. However, because they had so many cuts to tax relief, they had to ensure that they met their revenue projections. So we saw no additional money into that. 37,800 is also the amount of money that was remaining in something called bond levy equalization. This was a beloved program that came out of a 2005 school facilities lawsuit in Idaho that established a program where school districts that have low market value, or I hate to say it, property poor districts, were able to get their principal and interest of their voter approved bond paid for by the state. It was a beloved program. Should school districts have been lucky enough to pass a bond, which is very difficult in today's environment. However, there was that bill was repealed when House Bill 521 came into effect several years ago. And unfortunately, instead of shifting that money to other public school programs, the legislature ultimately transferred that money back into the general fund. So school districts almost saw a downgrade in investment because they transferred that money to the general fund and not to our public school supports. Again, this is a presentation I did for a very different group, so forgive me, but 80%, I'm trying folks to realize that 80% of our legislative races are determined in one election, and that's not the general election. It's in the May election. This is in a state where 27.9%, if you go to the next slide, Will, is the amount of statewide average that turns out in a typical May election. And if you go on a district by district, Ada County, I think we were up at about 22%, but shifting to Canyon County, less than 12% of their registered electors actually turned out. And again, that's an area where their election is determined in the May primary. So again, just emphasizing for people to stay engaged and make sure that they're participating in all elections, regardless of your party affiliation. And lastly, trustees, and I'm happy to again open it up for questions, 313,000 are the amount of public school children that are depending on leaders to be their voice and their advocate and how their educational value is delivered to them. So again, I know this was a bit of a different type of presentation than most people are used to. You want to see my drone on of each bill, what it does, I'm happy to share a link, including with members of the public. But for now, that is the end of my presentation. And again, trustees, I am happy to answer any questions that you have. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Quinn. I know you live this almost more than anybody else in this state, and we appreciate the work you do for us and keeping us updated on a regular basis. I mean, we live it a little bit too, but not the same way that you do. So
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks for your efforts.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Trying to educate the whole state on what's going on.
Thank you.
Any questions for Quinn or comments? Trustee Gregory?
Thanks, President Wagers. Quinn, what's the possibility of getting any wiggle room in House the Bill 1046 that has the video on? I mean, any kind of limitation, like you said, can it be showed once to 10th graders or whatever? That's not in the law. That says it has to be
It's not
shown
in the law.
any class that
Yeah.
has any discussion.
Right. Great question. Thank you for the question, Trustee Gregory. Unfortunately, I think that's where I'm going to have you rely on your legal counsel. Our legal counsel is sort of advising that school districts follow the statute as close as reasonably possible. However, there's nuance to that. So for example, and I did not go to public school in Idaho. I'm from Wyoming. So just to note that I don't actually know like what year the specific like maturation conversations are taking place, but my understanding where I grew up, in 5th grade, girls learned about their bodies, boys learned about their bodies, and then the next year they learned the opposite. So according to the state statute, you would be showing this video that might exceed the knowledge of these kiddos. For example, seeing a sperm travel through the fallopian tube as required in the law may exceed or jump up against what your kiddos are learning in that age appropriate or developmentally appropriate grade. So that's where I'm not sure how to answer that question. That's why we've been advising that we believe this meets the definition of like human sexuality and likely does trigger that express permission or opt-in provision. And I think that's a really safe thing for districts to do to ensure that they're openly communicating that this is a new requirement that's coming to you from the state legislature. It is model legislation. So if folks want to go see the video, it's a very well-known law called Baby Olivia. So if you want to go see or read up about it, it is traveling throughout other states. But our goal, I think, is to work with the sponsors to, if this is the will of the legislature, can we at least narrow it down to age-appropriate grade levels that it makes sense? And can we decide on a grade specifically that maybe it's shown, or a class specifically that's required to be taken, so that we're not showing it up to 7 times throughout a K-12 career?
Go ahead, Trustee Gregory.
Thank you. And then House Bill 338
Yeah.
with the 20-year payback. Do we have anybody applying for that money?
We have one district applying for it, yep, and that's the Boundary County School District, which if you have done any research on school facilities, then you may know about Valley View. They have a Valley View Elementary there as well, and it is in serious problem shape. So they are piecing together some community grants and donations and hopefully able to receive this revolving loan in order to meet their needs and do some serious renovations. So we know of at least one. I believe the second one that will likely apply is the Salmon School District, which Salmon, after 13 attempts, finally passed a very small bond. It was actually not enough to begin their project. And they've been doing community fundraising because even after passing their bond, they've been unable to start construction. And we believe this money could be the kind of final closing gap so that they can begin that construction project in Salmon. So we're hopeful that they'll be able to apply as well.
Anybody else? Then we'll. Okay, go ahead, Trustee Gregory.
Well, this question may be what Paul is going to ask. I was wondering about the English language. You're going to ask about that? Yes, I'm just concerned that I'm concerned about the restriction that this bill is going to have on our servicing multilingual learners and our language instruction. It's just going to be difficult to manage.
Yeah.
And I just can't believe that that's what people intended. But I also wonder what's going to mean for higher ed. Does it apply to higher ed?
It's a constitutional provision, so yes, it would apply to higher ed as well. So that's a great question, Trustee Gregory, and I just want to note that, you know, in previous experience, when this big of a constitutional question was before the legislature, we were able to get pretty thorough Attorney General opinions about how broadly interpreted this could be applied. But there's a policy through the Attorney General's office that they don't provide any upfront guidance on pending public policy. So we're having to rely on local legal counsel and other constitutional experts to explain over the next year what that impact will be. But we share a similar concern. Again, I try not to be an alarmist when public policy is running through, but when we amend our Constitution, your Constitution is like your driving mothership document, right? And so we do have concerns about its far-reaching consequences on English language learners and even just Spanish-speaking classes. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Trustee Benyon.
Deputy Director Perry, thank you, as always, for your expertise and sharing it with us. Would you have any lessons learned or advice coming out of this legislative session as a board we start looking forward to the next one?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking it. Yes, one thing that really shook me this year in particular was there is a big disconnect between our policymakers and today's K-12 classroom. And candidly, I have the only luxury is my husband is actually a teacher in the Boise School District, so I get that exposure even as someone who graduated high school 20 years ago, where I know that today's classroom looks a lot different than it did even when I was in high school. And I think a lot of people carry their own perception or bias into the world about what it should look like in school without acknowledging that we're all navigating changes on a very big societal level in our K-12 schools, particularly in the context of special education. I would encourage anyone and would be happy to give you the date and time to go watch the House hearing on House Bill 291. So that was the High Needs Student Fund bill, where there were special education directors from across the state giving very heart-wrenching stories about kiddos that needed two ASL interpreters or who needed a feeding tube, that their district is quite literally having to pivot major operations just to be able to provide that need to a kiddo. And there is an assumption that school districts are faking their special education numbers, to which I say there's no advantage to a district to do that. I think we're all seeing an increase in special education, and there's probably loads of experts in this room that can explain why. But there is a misunderstanding about how special education works, and there's a belief that that is maybe not something that a school district should need to provide to students. And I find that to be, we as a country decided a long time ago that our students, not long enough ago, but a long time ago, we decided as a country that we were going to provide a free and appropriate public education regardless of how you showed up to the schoolhouse door. And I think that there is a lack of awareness from many policymakers about the context of special education. And I'm encouraging school leaders like you all to lean in on what that looks like and really bring folks in, work with your teachers and your district leaders about bringing lawmakers in to be exposed to today's realities in our public schools. I think that a little something that small can go a really long way in ensuring that we're providing them context in the public policy decisions that we're talking about. So thank you for that question.
Just follow up to that. Are you encouraging that for school districts statewide? So I think that's the biggest thing. They all come here to the Capitol, but I think they all need to see what's happening in their schools. And when we have them disconnected from what is actually happening with our students, from the diversity of our students, we have things like this being pushed into schools with religion, with language, disregarding special ed needs. I think that if they could see what's happening in schools, we'd have a very different discussion up at the Capitol.
Yeah, Trustee Hasler could not agree more with you. Yes, I am encouraging this on a statewide level where I think we can really reset the narrative about public education by bringing folks in and having them be exposed not only to the amazing things that you're doing every day with kids, but you're also exposing them to the realities and the needs that you have to be able to serve those kids. So yes, we are doing that, but thank you.
Trustee Langley.
Majors. So I was just curious if, you're doing the roadshow and going to different school boards, and we are so excited to hear this information and have worked with you over the year to try to battle some of these changes and become more aware of it and fight next to you. Are you seeing an awareness in the regular community and about just the massive number of bills, about the massive number of changes coming to their public schools? What have you seen out there on the road?
Oh, that's a great question. So Trustee Langley, I have been going on the road in a lot of different contexts in the last couple of weeks. And I can tell you that I am seeing more people become aware, in particular about their schools and the impact that our public policy arena has had on our schools. But it needs to be happening at a larger scale. I hope that I'm encouraging everyone who hears these types of presentations to get educated and repeat those presentations to their friends, family, at their dinner table and at their church and at their Rotary clubs or what have you. So we're hoping that it happens on a grander scale, but yes, we are on the road. We are hearing a lot of feedback, and I feel that Idahoans are pretty engaged and are ready to be at the Capitol and ensuring that their policymakers are truly reflective of their community. So yeah, thank you.
Trustee Hassler?
You told us that some legislators are saying they've put 400 million into public education this year. What are they claiming those numbers are coming from if you're saying it's around 106 million?
Yeah. Trustee Hasler, we think that they're counting the 236 million of ongoing money into property tax relief. They're also counting the 50 million in the school facilities law, the rural cooperative loan fund, but that's not new money because it's repurposing existing money from two different fund sources. So they're kind of double counting investment that has already been made by previous legislatures, and they're counting the money to property tax to going to public school operations. So that's covering a large bulk of it. And then the remaining 90 plus million dollars that's out there, we believe they're calling attention to the sale of the bond from 521. Because Idaho has such a great interest rate, it exceeded that $1 billion by $91 million. So it got an additional $91 million on the sale of the bond, which I am not saying is not a good thing, because it is a good thing, but it's distributed on average daily attendance. And, you know, among 115 school districts, like that money goes out very quickly. And that's not new money. It's essentially money that's committed to the districts through the sale of that bond. So that's over a 10-year period. It's not ongoing investment. It's a one-time additional kickback from the interest of that sale of the bond through House Bill 521 from 2024. So connected with all of that, plus CEC, plus that 5 million for literacy, we believe is where they're coming up with that 400 billion, which is why we're trying really hard for folks to know that the breakdown of that does not necessarily play out to your public school operations are able to increase, because there was actually $0 appropriated for operations, or what we call discretionary funds. So I'm sure you hear about this routinely as your budget setting, but school districts live and die by the discretionary budget, because it's how you are able to meet the needs of your students in the various buckets that you have. And because there was $0 new dollars in a time of high inflation, that can sometimes be like a revision, like school districts, like fuel alone is costing more than it did a year ago. And so because we saw no new money in operations, I think there's an assumption from what you read in the media to what is reality for you all as you begin to set your budget for the next fiscal year.
Superintendent Roberts?
President Wagers, trustees, and I just want to remind you, as well as when that extra allocation went out around facilities, the Boise School District did not receive any of that because we were capped. So not only were we capped the first time, but when the extra allocation went out, we also did not receive any of that.
Exactly. And charter schools also got $0 of those dollars because it only went to school districts. So
Go ahead, Trustee Langley.
Yeah.
This is a special bone for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair.
Well, and not only were we capped, that looked like a great loss in funds for us. So we were capped for the distribution while they took away our direct funding from the Idaho lottery. So at the same time of being capped for receiving our $40 million one-time allocation, we lost our ongoing lottery funding, which actually they did in the legislature, because we could just tax our local population to make up the difference.
Yes.
Just
Very important context. So thank you. Yes. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the recap. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
work.
Thank
all that
you.
great stuff.
Thank
Take
you all
care,
so
Quinn.
much.
Good night. And we just have one person signed up to speak later on? Is that just verifying? Okay, great. If you want to speak, because I'll let you. Did you want to speak? If you, no, not yet, Kim. No, not. Okay, no. We'll let it. We gotta. No. Yeah. Go ahead and sign up. We'll cover that. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and go with the budget. So Director Kessel.
All right, good evening, President Wagers, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Roberts. This evening, I present to you the proposed budget for the 2025-26 school year. This evening's presentation will be more of a high-level view since this is the same budget that you've previously been presented at the April and May board workshops. Throughout the presentation, I'll be referring to the budget packet that was provided to each of you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at any time during the presentation. With that being said, I plan to move rather quickly through the presentation, again, pausing for those questions that you may have. As a reminder, the monies are accounted for in the following types of funds: the general fund, the special revenue funds, debt service fund, and the capital project funds. You can find a listing of all funds on pages 1 and 2 of your budget packet. The general fund is the day-to-day operating fund of the district. Expenditures are budgeted by program and object. The 3 largest general fund programs are instruction at 57.84%, which is detailed on pages 12 through 17 of your budget packet, followed by support services at 14.96% of the budget, detailed on pages 17 through 20, and finally, building maintenance and security at 11% of the budget. Those details can be found on pages 23 through 25. Special revenue funds are used to account for the federal grants and special state and local grants and programs. Some examples of the types of programs that would be accounted for in special revenue funds are the self-supporting programs that need to be accounted for separately, such as driver education, the food and nutrition services, and the Just for Kids program, as well as local programs and grants, and all federal grants are accounted for in special revenue funds. Special revenue fund details can be found on pages 36 through 51 of your packet. Nothing has changed from the April or May presentation on those special revenue funds. I wanted to point out a few other highlights, which the final round of pandemic-related funds were fully expended in September 2024, which does account for the majority of the decrease in the special revenue funds budget. Based on preliminary allocations for fiscal year 2026, the district anticipates that the main federal grants will either remain flat or have a slight reduction. The district is anticipating to have a reduced carryover in IDEA Part B special education funding, as well as Title I funding. We did have an excess carryover built up over the last couple of years, some related to pandemic-related funding we were able to utilize. So we have been spending down those carryover funds, and this year we will not have excess carryover going into FY 2026. The debt service fund accounts for the revenue collected from state school facilities funding in lieu of property taxes, and if necessary, property taxes levied for the payment of principal and interest on the district's general obligation bonds. The district previously received around $600,000 per year in bond levy equalization for the years that we did qualify for that funding. That funding, as Quinn mentioned, was discontinued and redirected with the passage of House Bill 521 during the 2024 legislative session. As a reminder, the district has outstanding bonds from the 2006 and 2017 elections. The district owes just under $111 million for bonds issued through June 2026. The district is still well below the 5% debt limit per Idaho code, with a remaining debt capacity of $2.3 billion. The bond payment schedule can be found on page 52 of your budget packet, and we do anticipate that the school district facilities payment received by the state in August will be sufficient to cover the bond payments for fiscal year 2026. Therefore, we would not have to levy the taxpayers for that bond payment. The district has 4 capital project funds: the bond fund, the plant facility fund, the school district facility fund, and the school modernization fund. These funds account for revenue from the bond proceeds, taxes levied, and revenue I'm sorry, I lost my place. Just a second here. And revenue from the state. The district has fully expended the bond proceeds as of the end of 2022-23 school year. The plant facilities fund is funded by taxes levied and the transfer of monies from the general fund and from the sale of district surplus property. Lottery dividends were previously accounted for in the plant facilities fund, but were redirected beginning with fiscal year 2025, again with the passage of House Bill 521 during the 2024 session. The district previously received around $2 million each year in lottery dividends. This is an example of the capital construction projects to be accounted for in the plant facilities fund, again, which is funded by the transfer from the general fund and the supplemental levy approved by the voters in 1988. Plant facility fund details can be found on pages 55 and 56 of your budget packet. This is a listing of the facility maintenance projects that are planned for fiscal year 2026 to be accounted for in the plant facility fund. Again, those details are on page 55 of your packet. Districts receive school district facilities funding from the state of Idaho. Per Idaho Code 33911, school district facility funding is subject to the required order of operations, requiring districts to use these funds to cover bond payments first, followed by any supplemental levies, and then any plant levies that they may have. The Boise School District plans to utilize school district facility funding to make the bond payments for fiscal year 2026. Any remaining funds will be deposited into Fund 435 and be used for maintenance projects. For fiscal year 2025, the district received $11.3 million in state school funding. We were able to utilize nearly $4.2 million for maintenance projects. We anticipate we'll receive approximately the same amount of funding for fiscal year 2026, if not slightly more. Here's a listing of the facility maintenance projects that we plan to utilize the school district facilities funding for. Those details can be found on pages 57 and 58 of your budget packet. Again, House Bill 521 passed during the 2024 legislative session established the School Modernization Facilities Fund. Boise School District was capped at $40 million. Had we been funded on ADA like the other districts in the state, we would have received around $87 million. The district opted to receive that in a lump sum payment rather than over the 10-year payout. If a district opts for the 10-year payout, the funds are then subject to the same order of operations as the school district funding, facilities funding. The monies in the modernization funding are required to be tracked in a separate fund, and they have specific allowable uses per Idaho Code 33917. The funds shall be used for school facilities that are directly related to the school district's core educational mission. The funds shall not be used for any facilities with a primary athletic purpose. However, the interest earned on those funds can be utilized for facility maintenance projects at the discretion of the district. The following projects are planned for the 2025-26 school year to be accounted for in the School Modernization Fund. Those details can be found on pages 57 and 58 of your budget packet. This brings us to the consolidated budget, which does show what those four types of funds look like. The general fund proposed budget is $352,656,303. The special revenue fund proposed budget is $36,355,247. The debt service fund proposed budget is $13,474,275. Capital funds proposed budget is $46,847,525. This brings us to the total 2025-26 proposed budget of $449,333,350. Now I'd like to talk more specifically about the general fund, which again is the largest fund and the day-to-day operating fund of the district. General fund revenue is made up of local, state, federal, and other sources, including the use of undesignated fund balance. The state revenue, which makes up 50.1% of the general fund revenue, is based on the number of students the district is serving, as well as the number of staff and the education level of those staff members. And it also includes special distributions as appropriated by the state legislature. Local revenue at 45.89% consists of property tax revenue, earnings on investments, rental proceeds, and tuition from individuals, which includes community education classes. The majority of the federal revenue, which is from federal grants, again, is accounted for in the special revenue funds. The small amount of federal revenue you see here is reimbursement for our ROTC program from the Army. Other revenue is the transfer from special revenue funds for the allowable indirect costs from federal grants and programs. The district proposes to utilize $13.7 million in undesignated fund balance to balance the budget. The district proposes to increase the local M&O tax amount by $30 million. This allows the district to continue with many of the programs that have been implemented over the past several years that aren't directly supported by state funding. These programs include providing all-day kindergarten, elementary and secondary learning coaches at all buildings, district-provided breakfast for all students of the district. The district was able to serve an additional 438,000 breakfasts this year due to that initiative that was approved this year. The district will also utilize the additional M&O revenue to continue to support many of the underfunded programs, including special education. The district's special education population continues to grow. The district also continues to make it a priority to offer competitive wages and a comprehensive benefit package to maintain our level of staff. The proposed increase in M&O tax revenue is estimated to have an impact to taxpayers of approximately $50 per 100,000 of assessed value. This estimate is based on an assumption that market values will grow 5% from September 2024 to September 2025. Should market values grow more than that, the tax levy rate would just be lower. The district estimates the total tax certification for fiscal year 2026 to be $156.4 million compared to the $126 million for fiscal year 2025. This is dependent upon the amount of the state school facilities funding in lieu of property tax that will be received in August, but we do anticipate that money will be sufficient. It's also important to note that with the expiration of the River Myrtle Urban Renewal District, that brought $1.5 billion of additional market value back to our district, which increased the maintenance and operations revenue by $5.7 million for our district. So the $5.7 million is included in that $30 million. As a reminder, state support is based on the number of students the district serves and the number of staff members and the education level of those staff members. For the 2025-26 school year, Idaho districts will again be funded on ADA or average daily attendance. The ADA is converted into support units using the divisors in Idaho Code Section 331002. Those support units are used then to allocate staff and allocate discretionary funding. Staff are funded on the salary-based apportionment based on their placement on the career ladder. The Idaho legislature appropriated funding for all rungs of the career ladder, including the continuation of the additional funding in the amount of $6,359, plus an additional 5% CEC or change in employee compensation for each career ladder cell for instructional staff and pupil service personnel. This increase resulted in new career ladder minimum salaries. The legislature also appropriated a 5% increase to the base salary for administrative and classified staff. The legislature appropriated an 8.7% increase to health insurance discretionary funding, which equates to an additional $1,752 per year in support unit. Health insurance discretionary will now be funded at $21,902 per year in support unit. It's important to note there was no additional increase appropriated for other discretionary funding, so that amount will remain unchanged from fiscal year 2025 at $23,472 per support unit. Due to an anticipated reduction in enrollment, the district estimates a support unit reduction of approximately 35 support units. This will put the district under 97% of the current year funding, in which case the district will be funded on protection. Even with the estimated decrease in enrollment, the district does anticipate an overall increase in the funding amount to be received for salary-based apportionment and discretionary funding. This is simply due to the additional 5% CEC increases and that increase in health insurance discretionary. You're all familiar with the state special distributions or legislative earmarks. The district does anticipate receiving a slight increase in funding for remediation, early literacy, and math and science. The district budgets an overall net increase of approximately $314,000 for a total estimated revenue of $7.23 million in state funding for these legislative special distributions. As you know, the board requires the district to have a minimum reserve set aside of 5.5% of the general fund. For fiscal year 2026, that reserve is calculated to be $19.4 million, which is an increase from $18.4 million in fiscal year 2025. The district proposes to use $13.7 million in undesignated fund balance to balance the general fund budget. The remaining estimated $8.4 million of fund balance is considered to be undesignated. Those are estimates. The $8.4 million is an estimate. We're still in fiscal year 2025, so we don't yet know exactly what our fund balance will be ending the year. Moving on to general fund expenditures. This student-centered budget was thoughtfully prepared with a focus on student success and well-being, fiscal responsibility, equity across schools and programs, and to align with the district's strategic plan goals. The total proposed general fund expenditures in the amount of $352,656,303 are displayed here by object or type of expenditure. General fund expenditure details can be found on pages 12 through 32 of your budget packet. The majority of the general fund budget, 81.72%, goes towards salaries and benefits. The next largest category is purchase services at 8.31% of the general fund budget. The two largest increases for fiscal year 2026 are in the areas of salaries and benefits. We'll cover the district's compensation and benefit package in future slides. The third largest increase is for purchase services, which includes the transportation contract for student busing, contracted services for school resource officers, the cost to contract for a psychiatrist and private duty nursing services, purchase services for the maintenance, grounds, and security departments, and the utilities for the district. There's also a 14% increase budgeted for the district's property and liability insurance. Great care was taken by district administration when preparing this budget, and reductions were made wherever possible. Travel and professional development, supplies, equipment, capital construction budgets were all reduced. This is in direct relation to the district's anticipated decrease in enrollment, as well as the district's goal to be fiscally responsible. This is another way to look at the general fund expenditures, categorized by program rather than type of expenditure. This type of reporting is dictated by the National Center of Education Statistics. Nearly 58% of the general fund budget is spent on instruction, with 15% being expended on support services. Pages 30 through 32 of your packet include a chart of general fund expenditures by program and object code. The four largest increases are in the areas of instruction, support services, building maintenance and security, and transportation. Instruction includes the following programs: elementary, secondary, alternative, vocational technical, exceptional child, preschool exceptional child, gifted and talented, interscholastic, school activity, summer school, and the detention center. $9.8 million of the total increase is from salary and benefits in the area of instruction. Support services includes the following programs: attendance, guidance, and health, special services, instructional improvement, educational media, instructional technology, books, and periodicals. The majority of the $2.8 million increase is attributed to salary and benefits as well. There was a new salary schedule adopted for speech and language pathologists, which does fall under that category. There's also an increase to health services again for the cost to contract for a psychiatrist and private duty nursing services. And there was a reduction in the instructional improvement program to travel budgets. Building maintenance and security includes building care and building maintenance for student and non-student occupied buildings, and also the ground maintenance and security programs. The majority of the $2.2 million increase in building maintenance and security is for salaries and benefits, and also includes a $100,000 increase in property insurance and a $200,000 increase in purchase services for the security program, which does include the SRO contract with the City of Boise. There's also an increase for building maintenance and grounds maintenance programs for contracted services. The increase to the transportation program is due to the required increase for the contract renewal, as well as the addition of community preschools and the estimated number of routes and monitors needed for next year. Taking a look at the salary and benefits package, the district continues to make it a priority to provide competitive wages and a comprehensive benefit package, which aligns with the strategic plan goal of hiring, training, and retaining the best staff. Salary schedules received a base increase of 3.5%. 2 one-time 0.5% base payments were approved for December and March, with the March payment being contingent upon additional unanticipated revenue received in the general fund. Experience steps and credit movement were granted for all eligible employees. The salary schedule for speech language pathologists was revised. Athletics salary schedule modifications to some sport calculation percentages and a 1% increase to the calculating base were approved, as well as a 1% increase to the calculating base for non-sports extracurricular activities. Substitute pay incentive rates for special education hard-to-fill positions were approved for fiscal year 2026. The beginning teacher salary in the district for fiscal year 2026 will be $50,288. That's in direct relation to the increase in the career ladder minimum for R1. The district's highest teacher salary for next year will be $92,687. The classified salary schedule minimum salary will be $16.57 per hour, up from $16.01. The district continues to employ highly educated professional staff, with over 75% of our staff having earned a master's degree or higher. 32% of the teachers in the Boise School District have over 15 years of teaching experience. Some highlights of the district's benefits package. The professional development stipend was increased from $650 per year for professional staff to $660 per year. Percy postponed their planned rate increases, so those rates will remain unchanged from fiscal year 2025. We did have a slight increase in the employee assistance program premiums, as well as vision services premiums. The major increase here was a 14.5% increase to premiums for health insurance. During the 2022 legislative session, additional monies were appropriated by the legislature specifically for health insurance. In order to meet the intent of the law, the district at that time decided to offer affordable health care for dependents and district-paid subsidy in the form of a district-paid subsidy, rather than going to the state insurance plan, which at the time was not feasible for the district to move to that plan. For fiscal year 2026, that health insurance subsidy for spouse and dependents will continue. The district budgets $32.5 million in health insurance costs in the general fund, which does include $2.7 million for the subsidy. Keeping in mind that the health insurance discretionary funding from the state will be $21.7 million. So the gap between the $32.5 million and the $21.7 million, the district will have to come up with that. Staffing needs are carefully reviewed each year by the district's administration team to assess the needs for the upcoming school year. This slide shows general fund staffing increases and decreases. 15.45 FTE in general fund staffing adds are needed. Many of these adds are directly related to the growing special education population. In addition, 10 FTE will be moving from federally funded programs to the general fund, which includes 9 special education paraprofessionals that were previously funded with the federal IDEA funding. There are 21.6 FTE general fund staffing decreases related to changes in enrollment, as well as 2 multilingual teachers who will be moved from the general fund to federal Title I funding. This slide highlights the major increases to the general fund operating costs. The 3 largest increases are transportation with an increase of $1.5 million budgeted. The increase is needed again for the required contract renewal, the addition of a community preschool, and estimated increased routes and monitors needed for fiscal year 2026. This is followed by health services with an increase of $521,000 needed to cover the cost of contracted services for psychiatrists and private duty nursing. And finally, the district will be implementing pod printing with Secure Print, which will allow the district to have fewer printers in the fleet, replacing several of the older, outdated printers that will no longer be supported, with fewer new printers located at centralized printing pods within the school buildings. This also adds a secure print option where employees will scan their badge at a printer or copier, have their jobs printed as they're waiting at the machine. This will protect sensitive information as well as reduce waste. This slide highlights the major decreases to the general fund operating costs. The 3 largest decreases are utility costs with a reduction of $475,000. This is related to the Idaho Power rate study case, as well as a decrease in utilization. This is followed by educational services instruction improvement budget, which was reduced in the areas of travel, professional development, textbooks, supplies, and in-service, for a savings of $466,000. And finally, the language arts budget was reduced based on estimated needs for fiscal year 2026 for dyslexia professional development, elementary textbooks, and instructional learning. Now I'd like to move on from the general fund and cover some highlights from the total budget for all other funds, which again includes special revenue, debt service, and capital funds. The proposed budget for these funds for fiscal year 2026 is $96,677,047, which is a reduction of $12.8 million from fiscal year 2025. The major swings here in state revenue and use of fund balance can be attributed to the $40 million that the district received in fiscal year 2025 for school modernization funding. So we received the funding in fiscal year 2025, but we did not appropriate to start spending that fully until fiscal year 2026. The reduction in federal revenue is primarily, again, related to the final round of those pandemic-related funds being expended during fiscal year 2025. As a reminder, there are a number of capital construction projects and deferred maintenance projects budgeted in those 3 capital project funds. The following decreases to other funds is related to grants or projects that were budgeted for in fiscal year 2025 that are not continuing for fiscal year 2026, which include, again, the pandemic-related funds. There was a grant with Health and Welfare Workplace Readiness. That grant is being discontinued at the end of fiscal year 2025, as well as a one-time grant that DTEC was awarded from the Idaho Department of Labor Workforce Development Council. And Title IV Part B, the 21st Century Grant, is ending June 30 of this year and will not be renewed. There was a 3.4% fee increase to driver education tuition. The Just for Kids increased their tuition 3% for before and after school program and 5% for the summer program. And the school lunch, the only increases that they requested were the increased prices for the adult meals and second student meals and a la carte milk. So no other increases to student meals. This does include my presentation for the proposed 2025-26 budget, all funds in the amount of $447. We did go through the presentation fairly quickly. I will stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, CFO Kessel. huge undertaking, and not just her, but I mean, all the administration in the room. It's a culmination of, when did we start this, in like November? January, yeah. But to put together the budget for a very complex organization. So thank
President
you and your
Wagers,
team.
thank you so much for saying that. It's not me that does all the work here. I compile the numbers and stand here and present to you today. Elmira Feather, our new budget and finance supervisor, is amazing. She has helped so much on this budget, as well as the district administration and my whole team. So
Yep,
thank
it
you.
is a team effort. Thank you, Elmira, too. I mean, we appreciate having you. Every year we have, I mean, well, not every year. I mean, this year we have a little increase. It's not as large as some, but we are seeing a decrease in students. So I would expect, not to see as large an increase as we have in the future and in the past. Where was I going to go? I don't know. Any questions from trustees at the moment? Trustee Langley.
Thank you, President Wagers. So my question is just to remind me, over the last 5 years, we've decreased the levy each year. And this year, we're going to increase it a little bit. Is that a normal thing? I mean, if another school district has a levy, do they decrease it, or does it just go until it expires?
Typically, there is no decrease. They would continue to levy that until it expired.
Okay, so I think my point is, and thank you for that, that I know this is going to be hard for us as a board to vote to increase our levy a little bit. I think we're put into a difficult situation where we really need to do that, but I'm very grateful that we've been able to vote to lower our levy every year for multiple years in a row. So, I think we just have to continue to stay flexible, and thank you for your amazing work at trying to decrease the budgeting where we could and try to limit that exposure while offering the best quality we could.
Thank you, Trustee Langley.
A little responsible. I mean, we take much less than we could max out. Where I know of numerous government entities in our area that always max out their levy ability. So it is our job to be responsible about it. That's the piece. And so, we have decreased it. This is the first year. I mean, in the last 5, we've had to actually increase it a little bit. So, Trustee Binion.
Thank you, President Wagers. CFO Kessel, and I don't know if this question is for you or maybe Superintendent Roberts or Deputy Superintendent Smith, actually, but I think I saw all the pieces in there, but everything we agreed upon in the interest-based negotiations with the BEA is reflected in our budget.
President Wagers, Trustee Benton, yes, everything that we agreed to this year, even, I mean, just those increases on, coaching salaries, the one-time payment, I mean, all of those are reflected in the budget.
Thank you.
And just a reminder for those, I mean, you all know this, but I mean, the board's been looking at this since, well, we saw our first round in April, and then in May at a board meeting, and then in May again at a workshop, and so June. So if you don't hear lots of discussion about back and forth on each individual item, we've had that opportunity to weigh in and do those things. And what? So, no, absolutely. Trustee Langley.
Thank you. So I was on the salary, 82-ish% of our general budget goes to salaries and benefits. Can you explain a little bit about how we were impacted by the change at the state for the salary schedule?
Yes, with the implementation of those career ladder minimums for all levels for R1, P1, and AP1, we did have to increase our certified salary schedule at least at a minimum to get us up to that R1 level. And then the district will this year be band-aiding, if you will, to bring everyone to their minimum salary schedule placement that they, depending on where they land on the career ladder. And then I believe that we're going to form a committee, and the salary schedule will be looked at being revamped, bringing it closer, moving away from our salary schedule we have now, closer aligning with the career ladder salary schedule.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Superintendent Roberts.
President Wagers, Trustee Langley, and thank you for asking that question. I wish I had the numbers in front of me. I know we shared them at the board meeting last month, but we employ a great deal more employees than what the state funds us for. So when we have to make up that difference on the salary schedule, that's for all of the employees that we employ. And so that's why it was such a big hit this year for us.
Superintendent Roberts, thank you for highlighting that. That's a good point because we do employ more staff, as do most districts in Idaho, unfortunately, than what we are funded for at the state level. So even when you get that 5% CEC and that additional amount per career ladder cell of 6,359, that doesn't spread across. We have many more certified staff than what we're funded for.
Follow up, Trustee Langley.
So along those lines, I know they're increasing the number of credits that are required for graduation, and I know we already exceed that, but with the new class that they're, or the new requirements that they're building, did they increase the amount of FTEs that we receive?
President Waiters, Trustee Langley, no, they did not. I know that probably does not surprise you, but they did not.
Any other questions on CFO Kessel? Any comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
President Wagers,
Trustee Gregory.
move approval of the 2025-26 proposed budget as presented by Chief Financial Officer Sheila Kessel.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Trustee Langley. It's been moved and seconded to approve the budget for the 2025-2026 year as proposed by CFO Kessel. Any discussion among trustees on the budget? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Budget passes. Thank you. Thank you for everybody for your work. All right, we will move on to the strategic plan, I believe, 2025-2026 strategic plan.
Good evening, President Wagers, trustees, and Superintendent Roberts. I know, I'm a little
Come on, don't leave her there all alone.
confused. I was thinking before I came up that if there was ever a time for all of us to like get up and stretch, this might be it. It is an honor to be here this evening with a handful of my colleagues to present to you the 2024-25 strategic plan highlights and request approval of the 2025-26 strategic plan. As we prepare to share highlights from the work accomplished within our 2024-25 strategic plan, I will take a minute to first review the structure of our current plan. Our plan is made of goals, which are the outline of the vision and the purpose of our district, as well as strategies, which serve as a roadmap or a guide for achieving the overarching goals. Previously, we have only asked for board approval of changes within the goals and strategies. This year, with the support of Jody Mills, we added key performance indicators. Tonight, the board will be asked to approve the 2025-26 strategic plan. And this will include the key performance indicators that we have added to associate with each corresponding goal. The KPIs are a new metric that we are proposing to measure the impact on student learning, as well as the impact of our work on our student-centered system. If approved, we will use these key performance indicators when reporting to our board, as well as to our community. Our action items are developed through the collaboration of those who own the work and approved by our executive council. Before we share the highlights, I want to point out that over the course of the year, we have shared updates from our strategic plan through a series of board workshops, as well as board meetings and within our committee meetings. I won't read from the timeline every presentation that we've shared with you or the corresponding goal. There are several. But I hope that you can see by reviewing the timeline that we have shared a number of updates across a variety of goals and from our strategic plan. All of the presentations we have shared over time have been glimpses of the incredible work that have been accomplished by many over the course of the year. The timeline continues with quarter 3 and quarter 4. I want to thank our board for all the time you have dedicated to supporting the work within our strategic plan and the time collaborating on the strategic planning cycle as we work together to develop the draft 2025-26 strategic plan. For the last couple of years, you have heard us talk a great deal about integration. All goals from the district-wide vision strategies down to the action items are connected and support each other. Departments such as academics, facilities, human resources, and student services all work together in synchronization rather than in silos. Each department understands how their work contributes to the overarching goals, and they collaborate to discuss the progress within those goals. This approach of an integrated system has supported transformational culture and supported our learner-focused system. This year, we wanted to represent the collaborative strategic planning cycle that has been developed over time with a graphic showing the many voices that contribute to our plan. This too demonstrates integration. However, it takes it a step further and applies a process to our strategic planning. Next year, in addition to quarterly collaborations, working together through committee work, board meetings, board workshops, and coming to you for final approval in June, we hope to add focus groups around each of our goals with the purpose of gathering voice from both our principals and our teachers. This process will be used to really take a temperature on how the work that we do within our strategic plan impacts at a building level. I'm now going to turn it over to Wendy Johnson so that she can share the beginning of our highlights.
I'm gonna pinch hit and take the first couple slides. I get to share some of the highlights from 24-25 in the areas of teaching and learning, and then I will pass it off to Wendy. So in domain 1, goal 1, this is where we're talking about the aligned curriculum. So if you go to the next one, I'll hit some of the highlights. First of all, we welcomed the class of 2038, and a lot of the kindergartens had a signing day, and we just had to put that picture in there because it's so stinking cute. Some really exciting work in the area of adopting a pre-K curriculum, which we're really excited to roll out at both our early learning centers. And then a huge amount of work in the area of like success criteria and learning intentions in all content areas, and adding performance scales across all of those content areas and grade levels. That's been a tremendous amount of work on the part of the content supervisors, teachers coming to the table. And it's been a really great collaborative process, and it's really makes an impact on student learning. So that's exciting. Next slide. This we've celebrated before, but we will celebrate it all day long. We were able to look at the data this year around student well-being and mental health and celebrate. And I'm sorry that these are so little, but top left, just to kind of point you to it, moderate to severe depression and social isolation both were drastically declined. And this is compared to the last time we had a large enough number was in 22-23 school year. So that's something really awesome. And social isolation is so huge because there's a direct correlation between that and depression. So for instance, 6% of students who have severe to moderate depressive symptoms, only 6% report having a low social isolation. So if you see that most students feel isolated and depressed also. And then the other exciting thing about this is on the right, you'll see that the majority of our students, 85%, feel safe around adults at school, and 76% feel that the adults in the school really care for them, which is huge, and we really want to celebrate that. Next slide is all about the district learning coach, and this is some data they shared with us in terms of their evidence of impact. And those three lovely ladies were our district learning coaches this year. Huge impact because they support the learning coaches who are making the difference for student learning in every building. So that's just an example of some of the things that they're doing. Through their work, they impacted 15,932 kids in some way or another, which is huge. And learning coaches, you go into any building and you can see the impact that they're having on our students and student success. Goal 2, this is the equitable opportunities goal, access to district programs and achieving success. This is the real focus we put on this year on a real continuity between core and all students receiving access to on-grade level core and transitioning into core plus and core plus plus. Typically, you'll see that like as a triangle, but we like about this is that we have the different domains across the top, which is new for us. It's all under the umbrella of multi-tiered systems of support. But the thing is too, is the green, the core, it never goes away. All of the things that are happening to further support students never take the place of core. And that's such a fundamental piece of this because then students don't have widening gaps because they're missing core instruction. So that's huge. And then you'll see training that we did to really give all of our lead learners and all of our instructional staff that understanding of the multi-tier system of support. Huge amount of work. The website is linked here. The website is all brand new and it's robust. So if you have time and you want to browse that, it's really impressive. We don't need to watch the video. Okay. And then the equitable opportunities across district programs, opening our first early learning center, and then Owyhee. I think that the bell rang to release kids on the last day of school, and the contractors like walked in the building and got to work. It is hopping over there. And it is going to be such an amazing space to celebrate our youngest learners. So we're really looking forward to that. And I'm pretty sure I'm passing it off to Wendy now.
President Wagers and trustees, it's been my honor to lead within the district this year as the newbie of the group. But I also wanted to give a big shout out to the many people that also helped with this great work that aren't here today. So many teachers and administrators and supervisors that led this great work. One of the things that I wanted to mention on the previous slide with our early learning centers, one of my good friends, her granddaughter just got enrolled for next year. And she called me to tell me how excited her granddaughter is, her daughter is, and she is because they were able to already be welcomed into the new school and feel a part of the community already. So thank you for supporting that excellent work. The information that you see here is such a celebration because often in schools and organizations, when we start a program, sometimes we see diminished enrollment. And in AVID, we have not seen that. With the great leadership of Teresa and the collaboration with the schools, you see such an increase of participation and the impact of that great program in our school district. And if you'd go to the next slide, you get to see the smiling faces of the graduates that all went through the program and were able to see the direct results in college entrance, in CTE opportunities, scholarships, because they are ready for their next step. So big kudos. And then the other area that I get to work with, that I got to work with this year and will continue to work with in the coming year is within career and technical education. That's a personal passion for me because I've seen the transformations that happen with children that become our future workforce by participating in these opportunities. You can see some of the data. And one of the things that I'd like to see in the future is that we change some of these data sets to also include percentages, because with a decrease in enrollment, it doesn't always account for that when you see a flat number. So we're working hard to collect the information so we can share that with you, but we're also trying to get some baseline because, as you know, sometimes metrics change or how metrics are collected change. And so that's why you see in the CTE
item where it says baseline year, we had kind of a new approach from the state on how they want us, how they have wanted us to report that in the past and how we're reporting it now. So we're just going to start from this current year as our baseline year. But many, many things to celebrate, as you can see in the data. And one of those items we're going to be highlighting in a future presentation, I'm sure, is we are starting our very first cosmetology program in the coming school year. So we're really excited. We had 521 students show an interest in that in the survey. So a lot of great things there on that slide. And then in the next slide, I'm going to highlight some of those items. We saw a really large increase in the percentage of students who are taking their workforce readiness assessment. You can see the difference between last year and this year. And then our technical skills assessments, a huge increase in those number of students who participated in that. You see the increase in our CTE diplomas from the past to this last year. And then we learned from the work that Chelsea did this year within CTE about the concept of using focus groups. And you heard Chelsea or Sharice mention that earlier, and that's something that we're going to be implementing to make sure that the adjustments that we're making within our strategic plan have input from the people that have to do the work. So we got some really great ideas and encouragement to adjust because of that input. And then finally, the pinning ceremony. Some of you were there to get to celebrate our health occupation students to become like officially recognized for their work. It was an amazing experience for the very first time, and we're excited to continue that work into the future. Thank you. I think I'm turning this over to Stacy.
Good evening, trustees. I'm so excited to talk to you about the impact your decision to have universal breakfast for all of our kids. You can see in 23-24, we had 750 approximately breakfasts, but I think, and then this year we had 1.1, almost 1.2 million breakfast serves. But what is really exciting is the kids that are in severe need last year versus the kids we were able to help that are in severe need this year. Almost 300,000 more kids that fall into that severe need category, as well as not severe need. We had an increase there as well. As you know, a lot of our kids fall into that category where they don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, but they still are not able to pay. And so it just levels the playing field. It gives kids a breakfast so they get to start their day on the right foot. And it's our schools, our principals have done such an amazing job of figuring out how to do that, where they're grab and go carts, and it's really neat. I've been in some schools where they have, for the kinder, they have pitchers, and it'll be like an apple, and then the lunch ladies will say, now, what do you think apple starts with? And you're like, oh my gosh, we're teaching it every moment. It's just the coolest thing. So the other thing that's really great is the lunches served. We've stayed about the same with lunches served, but Christy Smith, our food and nutrition supervisor, has done a great job of bundling those schools with CEP, so we get the biggest bang for the buck for serving kids. But this has been a game changer. I think all of our principals and families it's just a game changer. So next slide. And again, I love to talk about community schools. So Goal 2 is all about equitable access. And so our community schools just continue to grow and really have taken off in what we want, where they are embedded in the school. It's not the room over there that you can get a toothbrush from or snacks. That's part of it, but it's really how we do school. And so I'm not going to read this to you, but you can see all the great things that have happened. And what's really neat is the partners that have come to the table. So it's just incredible. So community schools. And then the next slide is co-teaching. We had a presentation for you about co-teaching. So if you remember, we started co-teaching with ML kids, and co-teaching, just to remind you, is where we have 2 teachers in the classroom. So we have the biology teacher, who's the content expert, and then we have either an ML teacher who is language acquisition expert, or a special ed teacher, right? And they have co-planning time. So the biology teacher knows the biology content, the ML teacher knows language acquisition, or special ed, no special ed strategies. And the class is made up of approximately half gen ed kids, half special ed or ML depending. And they deliver that instruction simultaneously, and both teachers are helping all kids. And it's truly amazing what the numbers you can see. I mean, we've had a bunch of trainings. We've had 139 teachers go through the trainings. What's really neat is we've done some coaching labs where schools get to, I'm going to just brag a little bit. Some schools came to Capital to see how awesome Capital is doing with their co-teaching. And it was great because they went back to their school and they said, well, we can do this. And then they have that cross-district collaboration. So we're super excited about the co-teaching model. And with that, I'm turning it to Becca.
And under domain 1, goal 3 is all about high quality professional development. And I really, I think this is where you can really see Jody's vision. The collaborative learning cycle is really working with the clarity training that we've done. We really started first with our principals, and so that's our lead learners, working on collaborating between our lead learners. And one of the best, at least it filled my bucket, opportunity, we kind of resurrected the quad meetings where all of the principals get to be together from the quad. But the cool thing is instead of just doing the transactional, we also had time with the learning coaches, and then the school that was hosting sort of celebrated all of the cool things they did around CLCs and clarity and what like coaching cycles they were doing. And that was such a great learning opportunity for our principals to learn from each other. And then we've also done a really neat thing this year too, in terms of talking about influence and really starting to grow potential new principals and new teacher leaders. So we did that first semester and second, and that's been an exciting opportunity also. And this is just some of the numbers. You can see the impact in terms of the participation, and I won't go through all of these, but a couple of things I'd highlight for you, like the clarity problem of practice and the staff well-being. Those two were both really neat because I think those were developed in response to teachers' requests. So once folks took Clarity 1 and 2, some of them were like, I have a specific thing I really want to dig in on. So like the math department at Bora they're out in front on the standards-based reporting. They came back for a problem of practice and worked in their grade level teams to work on developing the success criteria and how they were scoring things together. And then staff well-being came right out of our wish and teachers' wish for us to focus on how they're taking care of themselves, because you can't pour from an empty bucket. So that was really awesome. And you can look at all of those other things. There's a lot there. And then one of the nice things we did was we were really intentional about every time we were wrapping up a teacher PD or a staff PD, we had a QR code and they gave us a survey so that we were able to be more responsive to teacher need. So they really appreciated things that they could see a direct tie, take it right back into their classroom in terms of instructional relevance. The clarity work continues to be transformational. They want more opportunities with their colleagues. Learning together and being at those opportunities with the team is really huge for them. They like choice. Some of the recommendations on the right-hand side, they're really interested in more standards-based reporting training. They're ready for that. They would like more role-specific offerings. So you can imagine, like, let's say you're a band orchestra teacher at the elementary school, sitting down with sometimes the general teachers and doing the CLC. It's a great time to build, the kind of the collegial spirit, but sometimes they need something really specific to them. So that's sometimes the things that they're asking for, and we're trying to meet those needs. And then they always are looking for more opportunities and more support for ways to take that time to sit down and collaborate. So that's something that we'll keep our eyes peeled for next year also. Some of the things that they always are concerned about is time out of the building. They love to learn, but they struggle being away from their students, which it makes a ton of sense. They would like to be able to tailor some of the PD options to a school's specific needs, which makes great sense. One of the asks is to scale back the August summit because you have a million things you're trying to get done, and it's hard to be present in some of that training. And so I think that, you know, when you're looking at the beginning of the year, when we kick off, Wendy and the whole team has been really thoughtful about being really intentional around that. I would say, you know, a lot of this is kind of really themes that we hear a lot, which is, you know, there's a balance between too much and not enough professional development. So we're always working to strike that balance. Okay, and I think this is Nick's turn. He's standing behind me, so I think it's yes.
Next slide, let's see. All right. I thought I was doing goal 5, but we'll do goal 4 too. So that picture is from, I believe, our new to district meeting. So those are all of the newly hired staff that were in the district this year. Let's see the next slide. As you can see, new to district certified staff, we have 74, new to profession certified staff 51. Lots of credits earned, a lot of participation. 48 building mentors, that's one change that we made. We used to have a mentor for every new person to the district, which wasn't an efficient way. We had a lot of people being utilized for that. And we were able to consolidate that down to one mentor per building that could support all of the new teachers in that and create kind of a little learning community within itself. Next slide. So one of the things that we did is did a perception survey this last year. We did a staff, student, and parent perceptions survey with similar questions, and we've talked a little bit about that in some other meetings. But as you can see here, overall atmosphere, very high, very satisfied with the overall atmosphere of the school by all areas. And then school safety was another question within that survey. There was a specific question about how safe you feel in the school. So it was how safe as a student, how safe am I in the school? As a parent, is my child safe? And as a staff member, do I feel safe? And as you can see, strongly agree. Overwhelmingly, most of the respondents to that survey indicated that they strongly agreed that they were safe in the school. Another question was about being respected. So I, as a student, am I respected? As a staff member, am I respected by my colleagues, my administration, my students? And then as a parent, am I respected when I go into that building and interact with the staff? And as you can see there again, overwhelmingly respondents identified that they felt respected at the school. Another question dealt specifically with welcoming and belonging. That's a term that you've heard us utilize a lot over the last few years, and something that we're striving to create in all of our schools is creating a culture of welcoming and belonging in every one of our schools. And you can see again, overwhelmingly, a majority indicated that they strongly agreed or agreed that there was a great sense of welcoming and belonging in their school. Moving on to school environment and safety. One of the things that we wanted to highlight here is as we work to provide a safe, respectful, and supportive school environment for students, staff, volunteers, and patrons, is we conducted or completed a number of projects. And one of the great things about being the Deputy Superintendent of Operations, I get to highlight a lot of the great work of all of the folks that actually do the work. So the team behind the team we talk about. And Tom Willis is here, and a lot of this work is the work of he and his team. But one of the things that we did that we presented on earlier this year was we completed the state's required 10-year facilities plan, which identified over $525 million necessary to get our schools up to what the state identified as a good or perfect standard. That was a requirement to obtain the $40 million that we've talked about. Where we were capped, we would have received approximately 87 million. We got 40 million. But that process of securing those funds identified that we have about a $525 million price tag to get our facilities up to where the state has set that level for good or perfect. So that was a huge undertaking by Tom and his team, aligned to the strategic plan. And so really appreciate the work that they put in to get that done, that whole report done. We also have issued a request for proposal for our long-range facilities master planning. We've talked to you about that in a few different board meetings. That work actually kicks off on July 1st, and really excited about getting that started. We have had one call with the vendor that we secured through that process. They're ecstatic to be engaged for that project and looking forward to getting started. We have completed phase 2 of the Lincoln Early Learning Center remodel. There's a few pictures there of that. For some of you who have had an opportunity to be over there, that facility has probably never looked better. I would venture to say that even the day it was opened in its initial state probably didn't look as good as it does today, as being remodeled into the Lincoln Early Learning Center, which is really exciting. We also completed phase 1 of the Owyhee Early Learning Center, which Director Anderson highlighted. The crews were literally waiting in the parking lot for school to get out, and they were in there. North Junior High structural repairs to the music building. Boise High School, the building envelope repairs and remediation. If you've had an opportunity to be over at Boise High School, you can actually see that work going on right now. It seems funny when people say you're paying to have people scrape out the mortar between the joints of the bricks. And yeah, if you don't do that, you're going to have problems down the road. But it also looks amazing. It's adding a whole new face to that building and some of the work they've been doing. And then some of those life safety systems that we talk about, the fire sprinkler replacement at Kelch, and then fire alarm control panel at Cynthia Mann, 2 important projects. Some other building safety things that we have worked on this year, and again, highlighting the work of our safety and security supervisor, Bill McKittrick. He's done an amazing job as he walks into retirement, and that work is going to be taken over by Bryce England, who is our new safety and security supervisor, and I think he's out in the lobby as we speak. But we continue to analyze our current safety efforts, developing recommendations for improvement. So that's something that Bill took very serious. He was always out in buildings, identifying things that we could improve, and then coming back and talking about how can we make this happen. And then the other thing that we kicked off this year that is going to be an ongoing process is we developed and implemented a building level safety audit. So we have our state safety audits that happen on a rotational basis, where all of our schools go through the state safety audit process. But we thought it was important for our building principals and their leadership teams to do an annual safety audit through their lens, through their eyes. What do they see as shortcomings of their building? And then we've taken those back, and then we use those to drive improvements and changes in that building. We initiated a transition to an automated lockdown notification system that was rolled out in several buildings this year and is going to be fully deployed in 25-26. So that basically allows us, with the push of a single button, to lock down the entire building, which is a great safety feature that we're really excited to have deployed everywhere. Another part of that system is continuing to upgrade our phone systems to allow any staff member in any part of the building to initiate a lockdown. So previously that would have been something that would have had to come from the central office, but now any staff member in any part of the building who sees something that's alarming can initiate that process. One of the things that's in our strategic plan is to conduct regular emergency operations tabletop exercises, and we did that. We did a tabletop exercise, and then annually we've been doing emergency response protocol drills with our SROs at one of our schools. And so that's something that we are going to continue as well. We have continued and placed a large focus on making sure that the Raptor technology is being used in every one of our schools. That's the system that if you go into a school, you got to drop your ID into it. It runs you against the sex offender registry and other background check lists. So that's an important safety feature for us, but it also creates a list of who's in our building. So if we have an emergency response situation, let's say we have a fire drill, we have to evacuate the building. The admin assistant or the principal can generate that list. And then when they exit the building, they can make sure that all the people that are in that building that are volunteers or visitors are accounted for. And then we piloted Navigate 360, which is a new threat assessment software that we are adopting in the district. The full rollout will be this next year. We have a robust threat assessment process in the Boise School District. We are a school where other districts come to learn about our process, and it really is top notch. This is giving us a tool to document and make sure that those records are maintained and able to be accessed by wherever that student may go within the district. And so we're really excited about that rollout. And then we are, well, when we put this slide together, we were looking at transitioning to CTEL now, which is a state-sponsored threat assessment reporting system. Currently, we have signs throughout our schools that direct people to call 343 COPS. And this is a new system. We're still working to see if we can transition to that, but we may have a delay in that. And then another big advancement this year is we began radon testing in all of our district schools. This was generated out of a concern that came out of North Junior High, which I'm happy to say that we've been able to get those ratings back down below the required levels. But we've also rolled that out and are doing that throughout all of the schools in the district now as a standard. And then a few other respectful and supportive school environment items that to highlight, and this again highlighting the great work of Jason and Andrea Garrity, our counseling and social work supervisors. We have full-time social workers in all of our high schools now. That was something that we brought to you last year as part of our budget and that you funded. We have district board certified behavior analyst, and we're going to be adding a second one this next year to support our special education programs. Brian Walker has talked to you a little bit about Bronco Bold in all of our comprehensive high schools, a partnership with athletics and mental health. We've rolled out grooming and harassment lessons for our students. We have done student well-being groups. We've got pillars and PBIS for fostering emotional and physical safety for students. We rolled out Signs of Suicide Tier 1 curriculum in all of our schools, and we have Hope Squad peer-to-peer suicide prevention program. All of this in response to the tragedies that we saw last school year, and we were really able to respond. And the data that Becca shared with you earlier tonight about that improvement in the overall mental health of our students, I think is a great sign that this work is paying off. And again, to get to celebrate something that another amazing individual has been working on. You all have had presentations from Allie and the work of our sustainability efforts and the work of the green teams throughout the district. These are a couple of the great accomplishments from this past year. Allie and the green teams have received a number of recognition and awards throughout the year. But I think one of the most exciting things is that rooftop solar project that we are going to be kicking off. That's money that we have set aside for that project, and that's going to be amazing to see put into play. One, it's going to save us a lot of money. That's great. I like to save money. I know that everybody and my colleagues know I like to save money. But two, what's amazing about this project is it's going to have that educational component to it, allowing students to learn from the solar panels and what that means and what that does and how much energy that school is saving. So it's a really exciting project and hopefully will serve as a template and a model for future schools.
Good evening, President Wagers, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Roberts. We are on our final goal. Goal 6 is on communication. Yay! But as you guys know, we work with a wonderful team. Ryan, Dan, and Lacey help us keep our social media presence active, help us communicate critical information, and then also help us celebrate and tell all of the stories that happen every day in our schools that demonstrate the wonderful work that we are doing as a district for our students. As you can see on this list, we've already talked about some of the components of communication. I want to highlight a few we haven't talked about yet. Ryan has launched his second edition of Beyond the Bell
to help increase communication with not only our patrons or our parents, but also with our patrons in the community. As you know, we worked on the cell phone policy that, Quinn mentioned that we were a little ahead of people with that. And then we finished year 3 of student advisory and are super excited to go into year 4 next year. Every year is unique and different, and it's been one of the best parts of our district that we have. And then Superintendent Roberts is going to be launching a parent advocacy committee in the fall, and she's in the process of meeting with the members of that. In addition, we also love to celebrate, kindergarten, our student focus groups, all the fun things we do throughout the year. We tell a lot of our stories through social media. So this is a snapshot of what our social media followers are. And if you read really tiny onto each one of those bars, it will tell you how much that has increased this year. And we'll do a little bit of deeper dive in the next slide. For our Instagram metrics, the first graph shows you how far our reach is in Instagram posts. The middle graph is, did people interact with that content? Did they save it? Did they like it? Did they share it with someone else? And then the last slide of the green are our new followers. And you can see that we have increased our Instagram followers by almost 40% this year. And the next slide compares last year and this year of our Facebook metrics. So same type of graphs. The first one is the reach, how many posts are out there. The middle one is how many people are interacting with that. And then the last slide, or the last section of that graph, are our new followers. So you can see that through the work we're doing, we are continuing to increase our presence in social media. And we are just so grateful that we get to work with Ryan, Dan, and Lacey, and they keep us on track. And as you know, that is a big task.
President Wagers and trustees, I want to thank you again for contributing to the collaborative strategic planning process during the April and May board workshops, as well as some of the May committee meetings. Your input is valued and contributed to the 2025-26 strategic plan. Given that you have contributed to the very plan that I will ask you to approve this evening, I will only review the broad changes we have made, which include the following. We have added one strategic district key performance indicator to align with each of the 6 goals within the strategic plan. We also made multiple changes to strategies, which really included removing what we have referenced as the squishy words to make those strategies more measurable. In addition, we made a substantial change to Goal 6, focusing on building and sustaining strong, transparent, and inclusive communication and engagement systems that foster trust, strengthen relationships, and ensure all interest holders are informed, able to contribute, and actively involved in supporting student success. We feel confident that the changes we are proposing will continue to foster growth, accountability, and collective ownership of our strategic plan. We now present to you the draft strategic plan for the 2025-26 school year and ask for the board's approval of this plan.
Well, thanks, gang. And another one that's an immense amount of work and actually a pretty distinct change from previous years. So I appreciate that, the amount of effort, the amount of continuity that goes with it. It's amazing. So comments or questions from trustees on the plan? Trustee Gregory?
Thank you, President Wagers. I just wanted to second what President Wagers said, and appreciate the report on the 24-25 strategic plan that just kind of reviewed for us where we've been, the work that we've done. And I think that what I want to comment about is how far-reaching the strategic plan has been in with each of the goals. We've touched kids and meals, and we've touched needs of families through community schools. We've also touched what they feel about our buildings, what our facilities folks see as needs, and then the support that we've given our teachers, as well as defining and helping us all understand what our expectation is when it comes to instruction and, what happens every day at school for teachers and for students. Because, you can't build one without building the other. And if you neglect one, you neglect the other. It's kind of that symbiotic relationship. So I feel like that we have come a long ways with our strategic plan in making our purpose fit our goals and our goals match our purpose so that we have measurable progress, which is kind of exciting, especially when we have teachers who are able to say, I started here with clarity and now I'm here. And we have supported their efforts. And I'm especially excited just about the listening component of where we're going from here on out. Our ability to take feedback and learn from that. And I see that from both the focus groups with our principal groups, as well as with our student advisory committee, and now with the parent advocacy group, that not only are we engaging more people, but that's going to create connections. When you sit down and talk with people about things that are happening, you create greater connections and relationships build and grow. So it's, I think it's a real honor to be able to support your work by voting for the strategic plan.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory.
Any other? Trustee Donovan?
Thank you, Trustee Donovan.
Trustee Hassler?
And thank you for all of the efforts from the entire team to gather input. There has been so much effort there, and that voice is really guiding what we're doing in our schools. So thank you for that great work and for the difference that you've made in doing that.
Thank you, Trustee Hassler.
Trustee Langley?
I would just say this reworking of our strategic plan on and changing the language, it's really reflective of the work. And I just wanted to, join the crowd, but really acknowledge the fact that we are, it's not just a living document and we're seeing changes. We're actually taking that leap to put our money where our mouth is and make KPIs that are measurable against every single goal, and at a goal which has come from directly from community, parents, students, teachers, and administration about continuing to grow in transparency and openness for communication. So I'm really excited for us to adopt and change that goal specifically, and then just to have measurable impact and evidence that drives all of our strategic plans. So really great job.
Thank you, Trustee Langley.
Anyone else? I have one last thing. So I think it was 10 years ago, Nancy Gray, I went to a conference in Boston, and I wanted to measure how the school district did. And I went to the then superintendent, and at that point, he wasn't very interested in talking to me because I was a brand new trustee. But finally, we have KPIs. So thank you, guys. The accountant in me loves that piece that we can, we don't have to measure every student. We don't have to measure, but it gives us a chance to see how the district is moving. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, President Wagers. And I know we've said it once already tonight, but I want to say it again. A big thank you to Jody Mills for her work and leadership within the development of those KPIs.
Great. With that, I entertain a motion. Trustee Gregory?
President Wagers, I move that we approve the proposed strategic plan for the school year 2025-26.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from trustee Hassler. Any discussion among trustees on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of approving the strategic plan for 25-26, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you guys for your work.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to the 25-26 superintendent contract approval. And I guess I can walk through this. We have to approve the contract. Last meeting, we gave her a satisfactory rating. That's the highest rating we can give. just to let everybody know, we think she's more than satisfactory. But now we need to approve the contract. And the way we work this is we have a 3-year rolling contract for our superintendent, and they also typically get the same raises that we give our teachers. So we're following that again this year, where we'll have the same percentage raise that goes to the administrator, and then we'll also add 1 more year because she's now down to 2. So we'll bump that back up to 3. So that's what it will mean when we're approving the superintendent contract. Any questions or comments on the approval of that contract? Okay. Then I guess I would go ahead and entertain a motion. Trustee Langley.
I move to approve extending the superintendent contract for 1 year with the extension of the existing terms.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from trustee Benyon. Any discussion on extending the contract from the trustees?
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
Thank you. And I just have to say thank you to Superintendent Roberts for working with us this first year. It's been amazing. It really has been amazing. And I think that you have gathered a very, very impressive team. And together, you've produced things like a budget in challenging times and a strategic plan that is hopeful in the middle of challenging times with declining enrollment and funding. You know, the presentation from Quinn means that it sometimes feels like the winds are against us in many ways, but we put out our sails and we move forward. And I think that you've done a fantastic job of that, being a positive leader in our community and in our district. And it's really an honor to be in a district that supports and respects the work of the professionals that work in our system. And when you're at the top, it's kind of, I hope it doesn't get too lonely up there, but we appreciate you accepting and being our superintendent and having and continuing establishing good relationships with our association and working forever to do the best thing for students. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory. Any other comments, questions about it? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of extending the superintendent contract for 1 year with the continuation of existing terms, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we'll move on to policies. I know we have a couple folks signed up to do it, so we're going to we have to go through the first reading one, and we have to go through the first reading only one, and then we'll have you guys talk. Thank you for sitting and waiting for this. And then we'll have you talk before we do the second reading one, so you can have a chance to have your input. Director Anderson.
Good evening. So I'd like to kind of talk about the ones that are up for first reading as a chunk because they all kind of go together. So policies 3114, 3114R, 3115, and 3115R all revolve around foreign exchange. And this year, Jason Shanks is the person that's in charge of that. And he kind of with that fresh set of eyes, he's gotten some feedback from companies and families that are engaged in that process. And they were looking for a little clarity. So that is partly why we made some changes to all of these policies. The other piece of the puzzle is we need to continually make sure that we are in compliance with what the expectations are from, the state and the feds. And then the other piece of that is he collaborated with the policy committee, which is made up of principals and assistant principals. And it was super nice to have Diana Molino on that committee, because as principal at Timberline, she could talk about the practical implications of what the policies were saying. So not gigantic changes in any way, shape, or form, but always are trying to make our policies match our practice. And so those folks all kind of came to the table and made some tweaks to them. So that's the background on all of those.
Any questions for Director Anderson on those policies after having a chance to review them? As a reminder, we'll get another shot at these next month. So Thank you very much.
Okay, so then we're going to go to policy 1441 and 1420, and these were actually kind of previewed for you by Quinn earlier in the evening. These are our best attempt at making the changes that we needed to based on legislation. Which is why these need to be first reading only, an action item. But I will say to you what we said when we adopted an open enrollment policy. I would not be shocked or surprised if after we implement these, if we need to make tweaks, because when you're adapting policy to recent legislation, you just kind of do the best you can and then see what we need to do in terms of tweaking those. And then there was one actually oversight on policy 1441, the audience participation, in that some of the language we had included with the agenda items only, we left off, and let me see if I can find it. It kicked me out. We wanted to say that the president's discretion, they could limit the time of that chunk to the agenda items. And so if you look at the live version of it, you have the PDF version, and so it didn't update it, but there's an additional line there. So I'm just going to pull it up to you and read it to you so you can see it. Because that was just we copied and pasted in, and then it was an oversight on that. So we wanted to make that addition to you. So I will read that to you out loud so you can see it. So it is right on the second bullet where it says identify the nature of the comments, and then the second bullet says comments to agenda items will be offered prior to that agenda item being reviewed after awards and student reports. And then it should say the exact same thing that it says under the general business, which is at the discretion of the president, the total amount of time for comments to agenda items may be limited. So that's the exact same thing that it says in the third bullet. The total amount of times for comments to other topics will be limited. This one doesn't give you 30 minutes because it'll be the president's discretion, depending on what the testimony concerns. So just wanted to give you that clarification. And this one does need to be effective July 1st. So I will stand for questions on that one, because these two, the order of business is just updated, but this one in particular, because we have to put it into practice come July, I wanted to make sure there weren't any questions.
Any questions from trustees? Trustee Langley?
My only question is, so we're not limiting it to 3 minutes like the other area. Is it going to put unnecessary strain to not have a limitation? I mean,
so the bullet that follows both of the different kinds of comments at the discretion of the president, time may be limited to 3 minutes. That's for both.
Okay. Oh,
Yep.
okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Trustee Gregory?
Let's see. I had a question on the order of business.
Okay.
So down at J, where you said board trustee superintendent comments, it's now going to be comments on other topics. Is that going to be known as public comments, or are we just calling it comments?
Trustee Gregory, President Wagers, we labeled it comments on other topics, but I can see right off the bat that possibly we should, but we didn't change F either. We didn't say public comments to agenda items. So that might be something that we might want to think about.
Just because I wonder if a patron reading it might not know that that's the place.
That's the opportunity to testify.
Comments on other topics doesn't necessarily make clear that it's public comments.
Right. It could be trustee comments. It could be
Right.
administration comments. It could be.
Yeah. So, and I was also just kind of looking for same language, but I guess that is reflected on our agenda. So comments to public agenda item number F. Because that's not board comments to agenda items, that's public comments to agenda items. And that would reflect the law, wouldn't it? Pass.
Trustee Gregory, are you asking, does it reflect the wording of the law?
Where it said public comment shall be allowed, or I'm not quoting it exactly, but did it reference public comment?
Trustee Gregory, that's the intent for sure. I'm not sure about the exact wording, but it's definitely about public testimony.
Right. So I don't know if we did. I mean, we obviously need to decide that. Is there a reason not to put public on that?
Any trustees have any other thoughts on that? Trustee Benyon.
I think it's certainly the intent that it's public comment. So I think it clarifies it if we were to add that clarification.
Make it.
No,
Superintendent Roberts.
President Wagers, trustees, I agree. And I think, I'm thinking on this, but sometimes you might need to check me. I think as long as when we make the motion, we say that with the change of changing that to public comment, we should be fine.
Right. And I would, I don't know, just being picky here, I would say comment, not comments. Is it public comment instead of comments?
Yeah.
I don't know. And Nick, do you want to weigh in on this? Am I being making it too specific when it should stay broad?
Yeah, President Wagers and trustees, I think the addition of public, I think we were simply taking words from the statute and putting them into policy, but certainly the intent is public comment. So I have no problem with that. We simply took and regurgitated what was in the statute into the policy. So, but there's no issue in adding public to the comments section.
Okay. Any other comments, questions on these policies?
And Debbie, do you agree? You guys who are on policy? Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So who wants to carefully word that motion?
I'll give it a whirl.
Trustee Gregory.
President Wagers, I move approval of, and shall we do these separately or together? Of policy 1441. As outlined in enclosure number 23. I guess I'm going to stop. I wasn't looking at 1441. I was looking at 1420. Does 1441 also need to be changed to put public in it?
Yeah, because that's a new policy. So
Okay,
we can do
let's
it one
go
at a
together?
time. That's
One
fine.
at a time?
Sure.
Okay. So I move approval of policy 1441, audience participation at regular board meetings, with the amendment to include public comment where it says comments.
Okay, that's 1420.
Yeah.
Yes.
But let's do
Well,
1441 first.
Well, I just did 1441. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, but that's not the order of business. That's the one you're talking about. Is public comments.
Oh, okay.
I do believe, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's do 1441. So I'll just take
Yeah.
just a straight motion to approve that one as currently on Assembly. Somebody.
It also has comments to agenda items.
They both need the word public comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. So,
Okay.
so 1441,
It
dot,
has,
black dot 1, black dot 2, and black dot 3 should have public comment instead of public comments. Is that?
right. And that is reflected in 1, 2, 3, 4.4 or dot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it says public comment.
Mhm.
And then
Okay.
I think that would be, yes.
Is the intent clear to everybody? Is the intent clear to you? You? Okay. So let's,
1441.
1441.
Amend, as presented with the amendment that where it says comments, it should say public comment on other topics.
Okay.
et cetera.
Great. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Sorry. We're going to do this right. To, approve policy 14.1 effective July 1, with the change of public comment instead of comments on the areas that refer to public comment. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Let's go to 1420. Trustee
Wait.
Gregory?
I move approval of policy 1420 with changes made to where it says comments to public comment. I'm seeing it in F and
F and J, I think.
correct, F and J.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Trustee Hassler. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the changes in 1420 with the amendment of public comment instead of comments on F and J,
Effective July 1.
effective July 1. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Did we do did we do a second? We did a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Ah,
Louder.
killing me. Motion passes.
President
Okay.
Wagers. President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
If I could just make a brief comment that we usually are more thoughtful about this and we would send it back to committee, say that we're first to read, say this is the only reading we get because it is time sensitive. And I just want to say how much respect I have for the people who serve on the policy committee. And I apologize for not calling you and talking to you about it because it didn't occur to me till I did read these earlier, but I should have been a little bit more thorough. And
We all read it. We all read them earlier. So
Well, and President Wagers and Trustee Gregory, the fact that we had to put these out, to be timely, I super appreciate you guys. This is the feedback that we're looking for, so we super appreciate it.
and we will get the chance, as with all policy, if there's issues, we will come back and revisit them. So, as needed.
Absolutely.
So next we'll go on to policy revision, but I think we'll take public comment first. It's your section, so Kim, I think Kim Washington has signed up first. Kim, the only thing I ask is if you come up, introduce yourself, and if you have kids in the Boise School District. Awesome.
Good evening, trustees and Superintendent Roberts. My name is Kim Washington, and I have two children, in the one at Washington Elementary and the other one heading into North. So thanks for letting me speak with you tonight. I just want to make two quick side comments as this is my first time being here at a board meeting. Thank you for letting me be here. I have been asked many times by someone over there to come, and I haven't made it until a night that I decided I wanted to be in person. I'm sorry it's taking that for me to come here, but I've learned a lot, and I would love for the future to figure out ways aside from, I think Ryan does this great newsletter. It's been awesome this year, by the way, but other ways to get this information out to parents because I learned a ton. And the more we learn, and just like Trustee Gregory was saying, the more we learn about each other, yeah, it just feels more connected. So thank you. The second comment, I want to be conscious of your time, is about special education. My sister, twin sister's a speech language pathologist. She just moved to Boise. Of course, we brought her here a year ago. She works, she just finished her first year at Liberty in White Pine. She said it's probably the best working environment experience as a speech language pathologist that she's had in over 20 years of experience working in schools and early learning centers. And she'll be transferring or working at the Owyhee Early Learning Center in the fall. She's very excited, but I just want to share that. I'm sure you hear that, but I just wanted to say it in this setting, especially since it was brought up earlier. So, okay, I'll try and bring my comments very briefly. So I want to share my sincere gratitude to Deputy Superintendent Smith and Becca Anderson in the Governance Committee for their thorough and thoughtful work on Policy 3241. Your extensive work speaking with all of the stakeholders shows, and I believe this policy reflects everyone's shared concerns. I'm speaking tonight because I believe our district has an opportunity to continue to be a leader by making sure this policy fully promotes distraction-free learning. But I have one major concern with it, the smartwatch exception, as it may be the one element preventing us from achieving this goal. It was added later in response to principals' feedback about parent concerns. So here's my question. In this policy, why does requiring phones to be stowed away instead of just keeping them, why do we require phones to be stowed away instead of just keeping them in pockets? It's because proximity creates distraction. So why would we treat smartwatches differently? Smartwatches create the same problems as smartphones. They allow texting, calling, social media, games. Students can bypass school in silent modes. When smartwatches vibrate against the skin, students instinctively check them, which pulls their attention away from learning and their friends. Students are using them during class and recess, often without teachers noticing. And when elementary students are caught, consequences can be minimal. I can speak from personal experience. My own child used their smartwatch during school hours, getting around school mode without my or their teacher's knowledge. I have heard similar stories from many other parents. This isn't about self-control or personal responsibility. These devices were specifically designed by tech companies to capture and hold our attention, as many of us adults know well. Our children's brains are still developing, and I believe it's our responsibility as adults to help create environments where kids aren't constantly tempted by technologies engineered to be irresistible. Our educators already manage countless classroom responsibilities. Adding smartwatch monitoring isn't fair or practical. Our students deserve distraction-free learning environments, and our teachers deserve policies that support their efforts rather than complicate them. Allowing the smartwatch exception also creates inequality, in my opinion. Families who can afford smartwatches get a workaround, while others cannot. Research shows it takes 23 minutes to refocus on a task after a distraction or interruption, and 4 hours after reading a negative comment on social media or receiving an upsetting text. Studies also show that simply having a device within sight reduces focus and cognitive performance, whether the device is on or off. Consider this. Smartwatches only became popular 6 years ago. What has fundamentally changed that makes them essential to be worn during school hours today? I understand parents want to monitor children traveling to and from school. I gave my kids smartwatches for the exact same reason. However, this monitoring can still happen. Students can use their smartwatches before and after school. During school hours, they can place them in their backpacks or lockers, just like those with smartphones must do. To address parent concerns about communication during campus emergencies, law enforcement recommends that students avoid using devices during these incidents, as device use can interfere with safety protocols and put students at risk. I urge you to remove the smartwatch exception and apply the same standards to smartwatches as smartphones. Joining the growing number of schools locally and nationally that have implemented this approach with great success. If this is not an option and the smartwatch exception remains, please consider changing the language from instructional time to school day under the definition section. The current language creates confusion and may lead some to believe it's okay to use their smartwatches during non-instructional time, like lunch and passing periods, specific to junior high and elementary schools. Many schools that initially hesitated on phone-free policies due to anticipated parent resistance found that most parents actually supported the changes once implemented. Boise School District's goal is to create distraction-free learning environments and to better our students' mental well-being. If this goal is true for smartphones, it should also be true for smartwatches. I ask you to ensure the district policy reflects this commitment fully. Thank you for listening and your consideration.
Thank you, Kim. Kate.
Yeah, President Wagers, trustees, thank you so much for having me tonight. Like Kim, this is my first time attending in person. Thank you for having me. This was so informative. Yeah, it was a great night to be here. I want to begin by expressing my appreciation for the recent survey and resulting policy regarding personal electronic devices. It was encouraging to see thoughtful engagement on an issue that's impacting our students' learning environment, safety, and well-being in profound ways. That said, I was disheartened and frankly dismayed to see that smartwatches were made an exception to the new policy. In many ways, these devices can be just as disruptive and harmful as cell phones, if not more so. They allow for constant notifications, silent messaging, surreptitious use, and other distractions that pull students' attention away from the classroom. Also concerning is the potential impact in an emergency, such as an active shooter situation. There's growing evidence that wearable devices can unintentionally escalate danger by creating noise or movement that attracts attention, or by prompting students to act impulsively rather than follow emergency protocols. It feels like there may be a disconnect among some parents who support smartwatch use, perhaps because the risks have not been clearly communicated or fully understood. I urge the district to provide more education around this issue and to reconsider the exception in light of both safety and learning priorities. In the event the exception remains, as it appears it has, I respectfully request that you restrict smartwatch use to the entire school day, not only instructional time. Thank you again for your work on this important topic and for continuing to prioritize what is best for our students. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say, I'm a parent in the Boise School District. I have a rising fourth grader at Longfellow Elementary. Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, Director Anderson.
Hello again. So we do have two policies up for second read. The first one is 3234 gangs, and then the second one is 3241 personal electronic devices.
So any comments, questions from trustees to Director Anderson on those two policies? Okay.
Maybe a comment.
Trustee Benyon?
First of all, thank you to both of you for testifying. Appreciate your willingness to stick around for a long meeting and so eloquently communicate your concerns. I think the smartwatch issue is something we're going to have to continue to watch closely no matter how this vote goes tonight. We're looking at the cumulative feedback, both in terms of those who have submitted responses, but also in the surveys, and just a lot to take into account. And I think we'll be reviewing this for sure as the year progresses, one way or the other. So thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Trustee Hassler?
I just want to speak to the comments that came in from the public regarding the specific language and the committee work that was done there. So we did come back and have a discussion about why it would either be removed to have it be instructional time and have it go throughout the full school day, or why it would need to be kept that way. And in that discussion, a principal stated that it would not be able to be enforced, and that was not realistic. And we don't want to put policy into place that we cannot enforce. And so just as Trustee Benyon said, we recognize this is kind of the first step with smartwatches being involved. We've done an entire year with cell phones and been able to see that. So as we continue to move forward, we're going to have to be aware and have continued discussion around this. But that is where the committee came to as we discussed this and the reasoning why that language has not been removed.
Trustee Gregory?
President Wagers. I know that we had discussion about this, and I think that the piece that is important in policymaking is that you can always review and that you can come back and change things. And I think that based on particularly the work of our principals in piloting the programs that they have done with the personal electronic devices in their buildings, means that we could put the invitation out to them to also monitor this and see how this is moving forward. The thing that concerns me is those students who are on individual educational plans or individual health plans that could be impacted by this. I see that that we may be coming back to review this because the data of smartwatches being 6 years old and their necessity, even as a personal electronic device, is may need to be monitoring. I am open to next steps on this and how we will monitor it. But I recognize the work of the committee in coming to this point. So we have I'm weighing two things: a principal saying, how am I going to monitor this? And parents and students and teachers saying, how is this impacting my classroom? And I would look forward to feedback on that regard.
Okay. Any other comment? All right. I think we probably should do these separately as well. So I'd entertain a motion for the first policy, 3234, gangs. Trustee Gregory?
President Wagers, I move approval of policy 3234, gangs.
Is there a second? Effective July 1st? Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we approve policy 3234 with changes about gangs effective July 1st. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Second motion?
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory?
I move approval of policy 3241, personal electronic devices, effective July 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Trustee Binion. Any discussion? Trustee Langley?
I would just say that I'm going to vote for this going forward, but just with an awareness that we're in a very odd situation where the majority of the feedback really is to allow smartwatches, but that I understand from our discussion, we're going to go forward with watching and monitoring how it goes this year and assessing it going forward for the next year. So with understanding for me as a trustee that we will see in the next year some kind of report as to understanding of how that went, I guess.
And I'm pretty sure the administration fully supports that, and because it affects their lives tremendously. So.
And President
Trustee
Wagers,
Gregory.
I might also comment that we've just heard a report about our communication process and improvements and feedback loops that are going to be out there. And we have several that can give us probably some feedback within the first quarter about how this is progressing.
I imagine there will be feedback in the first quarter, both from parents and students and administrators that have to implement these policies.
Right.
So, yeah.
And just like our stepping our toe into student advisory committee, and it's just turned out to be a great thing. I know that we can address this issue and
it will require some tweaking, as with everything that we do. I mean, that's why we have loops, so we go through these. Any further discussion from trustees? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We do have a need to go into executive session. That's next. So I'd entertain a motion.
President Wagers,
Trustee Gregory.
I move that we move in to go into a executive session according to Idaho Code Section 74-2061BF. And that we recess this open meeting and convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing the issue covered under this section of code. Following that discussion, the board will reconvene into an open meeting on a vote.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Trustee Benyon. Clerk Snyder, will you do a roll call vote?
Trustee Wagers,
Aye.
Trustee Gregory,
Aye.
Trustee Langley,
Aye.
Trustee Benyon,
Aye.
Trustee Donovan,
Aye.
Trustee Hassler.
Aye.
Motion passes.
We will enter executive session and return when done.
Here's,
Trustee Gregory.
move we go back into open session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from trustee Hassler. All in favor of moving back into open session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are back in open session. I believe we have a motion from executive session.
President Wages,
Trustee Gregory.
I move that we place employee A discussed in executive session on paid administrative leave pending investigation.
Is there a second? Second from trustee Langley. All in favor of moving employee A, discussion executive session, on paid administrative leave, pending an investigation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Move on. Move on to board superintendent comments. Superintendent Roberts.
Well, thank you. I wish that all of our staff, well, I'm glad that they left and went home, but I wish that they were here because I would like to extend a huge thank you. The work that goes into the budget, the strategic plan all year long is phenomenal. And I work with the most amazing people ever. So your comments were very nice in my contract extension, but it has to do with all of these amazing people in this room. I also want to welcome Wendy Johnson to the table tonight as our new Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. So welcome, Wendy. We're really looking forward to this. And then last but definitely not least, you noticed some little gifts at your spot tonight. It is Trustee Appreciation Month. And we just appreciate all you do so much. I'm constantly telling everyone, and they are shocked if they aren't familiar with the system. You are volunteers. You get paid nothing for all of your time. And I mean, I was trying to come up with a reasonable number of hours a month. I mean, I think 10 would be such a minimum amount of hours that you put in. So I just can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you. So, and we appreciate you all year long, not just in June, but wanted to make sure that we give you a shout out for sure. What you do for the students, the Boise School District is really pretty phenomenal. So thank you.
So can we leave
Thank,
these here?
thank you very much.
Okay, good.
Our little
Yes, this is
trustee-
to help you, a little bit more comfortable, maybe even, and have all the materials that you need during a board meeting. So, and big thanks to Clerk Mass for helping put them together.
Yay. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind and actually it's very thoughtful. Everybody loves it, I'm pretty sure. Oh. Any comments from trustees? Trustee Hassler?
This is just a follow-up in relation to what we've talked about a couple times tonight. So I would like to know in a future meeting, a follow-up to what we are actually getting paid for this career ladder change from the state versus what we are paying. So I'd like the figure in financial terms in the future at some point.
Deputy Director Smoot?
President Wagers and Trustee Hassler, are you wanting the difference per employee on a salary schedule, or are you wanting the grand total that would include the fact that we employ significantly more staff? Thank you. Okay. We will get that for you.
Okay. Trustee Benyon?
Is it possible to get Quinn Perry's presentation?
So wasn't it connected to a previous agenda? It may be attached to a previous, but it looked differently. She kind of cleaned it up because she had the numbers superimposed on top of the words in the previous attachment last month when she couldn't be here. So maybe ask her.
Okay, one quick, there will be no workshop this month, so this is it. And then we will see you in July. So you get a little break, and at 5:30 in July, so a little early.
5:30, right.
I'd entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.